Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our second workshop for Metamaps. It's a new program that we're launching over the next 2 years, funded by the Arts Capacity Development Funding Scheme. And the way we're beginning is with a series of artist talks based on the idea of multimodal mapping, which should become clear over the course of the afternoon. We've spoken to all of our artists who have so graciously agreed to talk today about different ways of interpreting this topic. And I think over the course of the afternoon, the concept of multimodal mapping as a way to understand media art and creative practice in general, we'll have a much richer understanding of what this can possibly mean.
I think last week we pointed out that the idea for this project in general is to bring together programmers, computer scientists, and artists, and people that work in between all of these different realities. With the idea of multimodal mapping, I think originally it's more of a technical term referring to a translation between different data types and the kind of processes that you can adopt to do so. But I think today we will come to realize that it's a bit more complicated than that it happens at different levels. Some of these levels have nothing to do with digital realities, but have to do more with translation of processes in reality, of artistic processes and so on. And that's a little bit the idea today, I think, to find out, how everyone is looking at this idea and figuring out a kind of common ground to develop something together, hopefully.
Yeah, and what we wanted to do today was to try not to be too prescriptive, to let each of our speakers interpret this topic in relation to their practice, right, and then see how things join together by the end of the afternoon. So we're quite optimistic that this will work well, and we hope that you all enjoy either being a part of the presentation or being a part of it as an audience member. A couple of things before we begin. My name is Peter, this is Roberto. We have a collaboration called MBow, which is running this project. We make exhibitions and work on bits and pieces of creative hardware and software. We've also set up a Miro board. For any of you who use Miro, probably means you've been at a university or something reasonably recent, maybe during COVID. Miro is an online whiteboard that is just a convenient browser-based app for taking notes, sharing links, collecting images. If you feel that you want to have a play with the Miro board, the link is there and it's open. It seems to work best if you're using a smartphone with the Miro app. You can read it in the browser on the smartphone, but apparently it's a little tricky to add content. But that's just there as something to play around with.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to populate it as much as possible. I think we've used this in the past in other projects elsewhere. And I think it's a really interesting way to share not only text, but images, links, whatever you guys want to share. So that, in a month's time when we think about this again, we can go into the board, check what was going on, and maybe kind of remember some of the ideas that we're going to be discussing today, which I think is cool. And I mean, as Peter was pointing out, it's quite a flexible environment to use visuals, video, and so on. So it's really cool for artists to work with. I think it's a good tool.
So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker for today, Samuel Swope. Samuel's an artist who I've gotten to know over the years of being in Hong Kong. Always really admired Samuel's practice. And in Samuel's description of his own work, he describes using air and flight as a medium, which I think that's already a quite tantalizing introduction. So I might just leave it there and have you introduce yourself by means of presentation. So let's just switch over to your presentation.
So thank you, Peter and Roberto, for inviting me here to give this presentation. And it looks like Peter has done a nice job giving you a basic introduction to my practice. For over a decade now, I've been interested very much in the idea of using flight and air as a medium for art. And merging multiple media and engineering practices, I will construct and control aesthetic systems that work with air and are often themselves airborne. Throughout my practice, I'm very much interested in engaging with issues on hybridity, the non-human and human-machine interaction, in hopes to explore our place within these complex systems. Today, I'm going to talk mostly, or focus mostly, on a very recent work titled Nervous Thrasher. Nervous Flasher was presented this year in February at Current Plans. I'm not necessarily focusing on this because I myself am a little nervous, well maybe a little bit, but regardless, I think it fits really well in with what Peter and Roberto are doing with MetaMaps and multimodal mapping. Nervous Thrasher for me is a visceral combination of performance, power, sound, strange encounters that we see both in reality and also in cinema. Therefore, sci-fi is also incorporated into this performance and installation, as well as B-humor, or the absurd concepts that come from B-humor that we see often in cinema as well. All of that is introduced or is part of the root or the core of how I'm developing the abstract narrative for the performance and how I can then engage that with the human experience and the audience. Overall, I describe it as an experimental installation involving acts of sonification from airborne sculptures. I made the conscious decision before doing the work not to depend on professional cameras or other devices for recording and archiving the work. Instead, I decided that I would rely only on social media. The following is a very short social media cut. So following the social media cut, I would like to briefly comment that there is a history to airborne art. And part of my practice is researching what has existed before, and a lesser known example comes from Charles Fraser's a work journal of flying sculpture, which he published in Art Forum in 1967. At the end of introducing a number of different versions of his aerial sculptures, he talks about flying sculpture and how it relates to Western tradition, being an offspring of Calder's mobiles, but also he later describes that this is the next logical step for releasing sculpture from the ground, out of the museums and into the world. For me, however, in the 21st century with innovative technologies, we can see that with the use of drones, sensors, and artificial intelligence or machine learning, the possibility for a new dynamic and spectacular airborne art is possible. In Nervous Thrasher, there were two airborne sculptures, one being the flying car wheel, and the other this very strange, unusual helium-assisted sculpture. Of course, also, this was a little bit different for me because in the past, when I create aerial sculptures and incorporate machine intelligence with them, I will let them perform by themselves. This time, I was very much a part of this relationship, introducing my own body within these systems, which also became moments of provocation with the audience and also copious amounts of sweat from myself if you happened to be there. 45 minutes back to back performing, I was drenched. But I wanted that sweat to be there. And in talking about, and because for me, it brings in also the emotion of being in the lab and this madness of creating these things. And in this case with the flying car wheel, I want to highlight that this is not a real car wheel. And in fact, it is way, way, way too challenging to do this with a real car wheel. And also, it is one of my missions when I create these airborne sculptures to not have a drone carrying a car wheel, but rather it's a car wheel that has evolved to become a hexacopter. And because this is so challenging to do with the heavy weight of a real tire, I depended on my hyper-realistic sculptural techniques, as well as some skills in 3D modeling and 3D printing processes, and also incorporating into the system or embedding into the system my highly configurable flight controller. To begin the development of this, I started prototyping to scale. Seen here on screen is not an ideal way to do this. In terms of engineering methods, this is FDM, carbon fiber, nylon filament, FDM layer by layer printing, printed in 6 and then welded together. In order for me to best understand how to work out the numbers and computations for the flight controller. I then took this out to a remote location or a rural location in Hong Kong for a beta test flight outside of confined studio space, because if you are familiar with working in Hong Kong, we often have smaller spaces. So for when I need to understand how well this thing can fly, I need to go outdoors in a more open area. And away it went.
UFO.
Yeah, and to keep a long, dramatic story short, I got one flight. It collided with a tree, but it's okay. Yeah, I've made peace with that. And it also, for me, it provided enough evidence that this form and my flight controller and the motors and the propellers that I've purchased were capable and powerful enough for aerobatics. I then proceeded to develop this. Ideally, using nylon SLS printing would be perfect because it's used in aerospace engineering, but I opted for ABS-like resin due to cost. To this day, the ABS-like resin has successfully completed all of my stress tests, and you could see in the social media cut towards the end, I ripped the tire up close to the ceiling, I cut throttle and let it drop down. That's the most impact this version of the sculpture has gone through. I don't know how much more I want to give it, but that's okay. Additionally, when doing this, we have to consider weight. I don't want it too light because then it's fragile, but I also don't want it too heavy because then I don't have a very good thrust to weight ratio. Each one of my motors produces about 1.5 kg at 100% throttle. Add on additional weight of other components, and you're left with about 4:1 thrust to weight ratio. 25% throttle, you're already hovering. So this thing does have a decent amount of rip. I then introduce into it some of my finishing techniques. Here we can see the rim is both heated and scoured chrome paint. And then I push into that surface a combination of car wax and dirt and grime and soil from the earth, and also the street. To develop the tire, it's not rubber, but it's meant to just kind of give us the feeling as if it is or could be a tire through photographs or in low lighting situations or from at a distance. Shown here on the right is my process of laminating and engraving the expanded polyethylene foam. Finish to scale. I had to verify that it matched. I think it works. It's believable enough. I added on the flight controller, the rotors, and the battery. And because these motors are very powerful, they're also energy hungry. And the battery doesn't last long, but that also, for me, is not just a compromise, because it's also something I want during the performance. I want to prolong and delay how the kind of nervous or anxiety about whether or not this tire will take off. And then the moment I do take it off, it's a sudden burst. It happens for a short amount of time, then it lands back on the ground. That is also with is a part of the concept. To go on a tangent, we'll rewind a little bit. I think it's important to do this. Back in 2022, I did a scaled iteration of a work of mine under the title Floating Room. And this iteration was presented in a very small, confined space at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. The previous version of Floating Room was presented in 2017 at Kronos Art Center in Shanghai. Then I was using ready-made drones. And this was not the first time I used ready-made, but I was already starting to have an internal artistic engineering struggle where you have a ready-made drone. That ready-made drone is, in essence, is carrying the lamp, even though the shell of the lamp is constructed around the drone's body. But in 2022, I gave myself about 10 months before the Smithsonian show that I would start to develop my own highly configurable flight controller so that it would fit better in with my concept of the object has evolved into the drone or the aerial vehicle that has this new ability to fly. And for me, that is a little bit more like a creature. And in this case, I ended up I went into a garage space in the Midwest of America, and I 3D scanned the entire garage, and then there was a fire extinguisher, and I was like, okay, that's perfect. I can turn that into a creature with this wobbly nose. It looks a little bit something like this. The flying sculpture is using an artificial neural network for obstacle avoidance. An array of sensors. Fast forward a little bit so that we can look at the bottom of this crushed up, 3D scanned, printed, strange fire extinguisher. There's an array of 5 different time-of-flight sensors. Each one of those time-of-flight sensors are constantly reading the room, and it has a 3-dimensional space. And for me, this artificial neural network that I'm using, I believe is imperfect. I know it's imperfect. But that is what makes it more exciting in terms of these exaggerated flight behaviors. When I use the ready-made drones, they're very stable. And that looks good in some cases, but in other cases, I want the feeling to be a little bit more quick and aerobatic and under constant change. And so that's why I started to develop my own and using different kinds of ways of working with the artificial neural network to use it as both a sophisticated way of understanding space, but also as a way to complicate things and make it more exaggerated. A very similar artificial neural network is used for this strange helium-assisted sculpture that moves through space. And I think it's also the moment where this is how this work fits really well in with the MetaMaps or the multimodal mapping. And that is the autonomous flight controller is constantly reading its space, trying to figure out how to move, how to navigate, and then that in-flight data is wirelessly transmitted back to a remote server for real-time audio synthesis that is then amplified out into the space to be felt and heard by audience. An example of how the sound design gets developed goes a little bit something like this. You have a single rotor and propeller. You synthesize that in a note A. And then A minor 7th with a little reverb. And then sonification of flight. Okay, one more time, but faster. Now you get the idea. Okay, so the software I'm using is Super Collider in order to create this real-time audio synthesis and the wireless network communication. It's not identical to the example I just gave you, but it's a similar workflow where I start with non-tempo drone loops, and then I run those through a granular synthesizer. In the previous example, I'm not doing that, but the methods of creating the sound design, the platform in which I use, and the way I do the mapping is always different, but following a similar methodology. It's a little bit smaller and hard to see on screen. On the bottom right, you can see where flight controller real-time data-driven sound design is starting to happen. And things like the granular synthesizer's rate is being controlled by the artificial neural network, one data set from that. Another data set is controlling the rates of the grain. You also have position controlling the pan, a number of different variables in how that sound gets immediately reinterpreted and generated compositions based off of that real-time data that's being wirelessly transmitted. The network communication for me is part of what makes it complex. The sound design itself, for any expert would see, is actually quite simple. It's not overly complicated, in other words. But for me, what's happening between the sculpture and the immediate surroundings and its encounters with people, and how people are constantly moving in space, and how that dictates part of the composition, is where things get the most complex and interesting for me. For the flying, I'm sorry, Peter, I keep blocking you. For the flying tire, I'm not using the flight controllers. This is different. So whereas in the previous airborne sculpture, I am using the in-flight data from the autonomous flight controller, in this case, I'm using my own input as a way to generate the sound while flying the car wheel. So this is operated from the remote control that's connected up with the flying car wheel. This case, I'm thinking mostly about heavy bass, powerful subwoofer, the beats per minute of that bass being controlled by the throttle of the remote control, and then also introducing in there a sol or a wobble synth, and that is being controlled also by the throttle. And then we have the frequency being controlled by the pitch of the drone, and then I believe the cutoffs for the frequency of the bass is being controlled by the roll. Very, very simple, but for me, this is part of the experience, the human experience, because we are not just visually seeing the car wheel airborne and going through traversing space, airspace, but we are also hearing it and we're feeling it simultaneously. And I think that, to me, is very impactful and visceral. And then to quickly conclude, some of the research and development that was used in the work Nervous Thrasher this year also finds its place in enhancing embodied telepresence in first-person view drone pilots through real-time data-driven sound design. That's a really long title. I don't remember any of you to ever go through your papers with such a long title, but I think it drives home the point. I think it's important to note that in FPV drone flying, the perception of the pilot merges with that of the drone, so thus the mind and the machine are in sync, and the pilot embodies this soaring aerial vehicle. And for the 29th International Symposium on Electronic Art, I will go to present this research. This full peer-reviewed paper examines current limitations of human-drone sensory overlay and introduces a widely applicable methodology for oral sensory stimulation in FPV drone control. And I'm doing this in hopes that the FPV pilot can then transcend the current limitations of ocular centrism in drone control and access an immediate oral landscape that induces a heightened sense of spatial awareness while airborne. This early study with this pilot, I asked him in the very, very beginning, why did you get involved with FPV drone flying? And he said, because it offered him a new perspective, something like a bird. So in this early clip, this very quick study with him, I think this is quite fitting. It's very quick. Okay, so that one he obviously enjoyed the most of the different sound designs that I presented to him. This was, again, very early studies, and I'm currently working on turning this into a more compositional work with a little bit more purpose. And that is what I will be presenting at Vvzela this June. Anyway, thank you all for your attention and laughter.
Okay. Sam, thanks so much for getting us started.
Yeah.
For today. Are there any questions from the audience for Samuel Swope for his presentation? Okay, yeah. Paul, I'm going to run and give you the microphone.
Hey, Samuel.
We did start late, right? Yeah. Okay, okay.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. It was very, very interesting to get a better insight into that. And I really loved the performance. I wanted to know how you are incorporating the sound that the drone makes by itself, just by flying, into the sound design that you're laying on top.
Oh yeah, thank you for asking that, Paul. I totally forgot to talk about that. You know, before you give presentations, you always like, okay, don't forget to talk about this. That's one of them. So in Nervous Thrasher, especially with the helium-assisted drone, I was very much interested in creating a harmony between these two sounds, both the mechanical sound and the synthesized sound, so that when you hear them simultaneously and spatially, it becomes more complex and dynamic. So that it's not, so it is different than when, say, in this new work where they're wearing head devices and they no longer hear the drone, they're removed. But in terms of Nervous Thrasher, I was very much trying to figure out, is there a way that I can create more of a harmonized sound relationship between these two, both the mechanical hardware sound and the turbulence that's created in addition to the synthesized sound. And then with the flying tire, I don't know if this is true, but I can kind of, from a heuristic understanding of engineering and physics, maybe conclude that the heavy subwoofer bass that is filling the space, all those sound waves are actually additionally being broken by the tire and from its very extreme amount of turbulence, because we can feel that, the intensity of the wind, right? So maybe it's possible that the immediate experience of that heavy bass and the tire flying at the same time is quite noisy due to the breaking of the sound waves. So yes, I'm trying to think about that stuff. And in the future, I will continue to develop how these two can coexist. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
Great question and super interesting answer, especially with the thrust of the blades and the sound. I hadn't even considered this. Yeah. Any other questions? We can probably take one more question for Sam before we move on to the next presentation. Oh, Roberto has one. Yes. Yeah. Do you want this?
No, because some of this is new to me. This sonic-based approach I think it's called FPV, yeah?
Yeah.
Are you developing like sonic landscapes that they kind of navigate, and where, I mean, how does it actually work? What's the type of interaction that they're establishing with sound, let's put it that way? When they move the drone, is it generating different sounds depending on position? Mm-hmm. And so instead of reacting directly to the visual elements, they're reacting to the sound that is coming through? Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, I mean, I guess this is part of what you're doing now. Have you compared a similar flight with and without oral inputs to see, what's the difference there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of, but not that scientific.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to approach this with a tinge of scientific rigor, but mostly in the technological development of the hardware. In relationship between and then using any kind of EEG analysis, I've decided that I would abandon any kind of quantitative data sets that say, oh, FPV filing in this situation produces this kind of emotional response versus this with the oral sensory stimulation. I'm going a little bit more for the qualitative approach when it comes to those two comparisons. But when I have studied with these FPV pilots, I mean, their immediate thing that happens is that they'll say something like, oh my gosh, they'll be like, so spatial, because when the drone rolls, the sound travels. When it flips back, it travels. The spread changes constantly, and your throttle changes will increase the tempo or the beats. And so they are being stimulated by this oral application that's being introduced into the experience. But I'm trying, well, anyway, maybe further down the road, I might consider to be a little bit more quantitative about it. But for right now, I want to focus on the quality and the purpose and what types of different flying and what types of different sounds control that emotional experience while you're flying, or vice versa, the type of flying controls the composition. So they kind of work together in that way.
I think it's a really cool approach to mapping, and eventually you could have a school of visually impaired drone.
Yes, that is another thing I wrote. Very fine line in the research paper.
That would be something.
Yeah.
Flying a drone through sound.
And I'm working on my second iteration right now, and so we'll see where that takes me. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
So do you find out any differences that, because you are using FPV, so it's like actually it's a VR-like headset. So any differences to do it in a actual physical world with this kind of experience and a totally virtual experience that with included your interactive soundscape?
Are you asking if I'm considering the virtual space?
Is there any differences that, because now actually it's kind of in between?
It's in between. It really is in between. But there are other technological advancements that are being made for the ocular goggle to introduce in augmented realities, so that while you're flying in the physical reality through the headset, you would also be encountering virtual objects that would be overlaid. So I see the possibility for these to exist, but right now I'm trying my best to focus on the so-called physical reality of flying. Because for me, when I've used the drone simulators in the computer, my checking out of my mind is very different than when I am sitting in the field or some other location, I put on the goggle and I touch the remote control and I take off with the drone. My head checks out. Like I just drop immediately and I can't stop that. And I've asked professional pilots too who fly with these real drones and they go out to the field and they practice. I said, do you ever get used to this immersive experience? And they're like, oh yeah, we totally get used to it. But if you take off your goggles and you watch them, they're doing the same stuff, dropping their head. So I don't think it really ever 100% leaves you. And so I'm trying to focus most on that, the physical body, leaving your own physical body and going into a physical machine. That's very interesting for me. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm sure we have more questions, but we're running out of time. So we'll have time later for more kind of informal discussions. So thank you, Sam.
I pressed the wrong
And now we would like to invite Karen to join us. I guess you all know Karen, a performer, artist, curator, and to us one of the main voices of the new music scene and sound art scene in Hong Kong.
Thanks for the invitation here today. My name is Karen. I'm a percussionist by training. I focus on contemporary new music but I also wear another hat as an artistic director of Contemporary Music Hing, which I'll talk a tiny little bit later. When it comes to multimodal mapping, all that stuff, I don't, to be honest, I don't really know what this is until I was talking to Roberto one day, and he was like, oh, just like how you approach transcribing or translating that data into what you can do with it. And then I started to understand that perhaps some of the work that I've done before is along the lines of multimodal mapping. I don't know, but perhaps we can talk about that later. As a percussionist by training, I used to do a lot of performances, solo percussion, ensemble percussion works, and then I got into live processing stuff. So I was performing on acoustic instruments, but some of the sounds are being live processed through Max or PD, etc., which I'll talk about later. One of this performance that I've done recently is called Somnium, and this is a trance installation opera by Steve. We did it in 2022. It was during COVID, and I was in the theater while there was another installation part at the gallery. But at the theater, I was a performer, and in fact, I had a role as a daughter, and I had a dad over there who's on the right side, and I interact with him musically in the show, as well as Steve, who is the one of the performer in the show where he kind of transfers between the gallery and the theater. And I like to talk about this work because here I have an instrument that's developed by Kenny, actually, which he'll talk about it more later. I had this instrument that didn't really look like an instrument. And maybe I'll show you a little bit. As you can see, I was the person with the glowing ball. And in fact, the glowing ball is an instrument that's developed by Kenny using gyroscope and OSC, I believe, and he'll talk about it more later. But what my role was to use it as an instrument. So in fact, I've been using a lot of non-instrument, I guess, objects and instruments that are made perhaps interactive media based. And in this work, I was working with this instrument that was able to control the multi-channel speakers in the room. And if you remember, there was a tone that was a slightly off A sign tone behind it. That was a tone that I was actually controlling. And in the multi-channel theater setting, I was changing the direction. I was also changing the dynamics, so the louder, the softer. And also, I think that those were only two factors that I was changing. And it didn't really require any skills, but I was actually, in a way, I was kind of transferring how I approach percussion into using this instrument, because all I had to do was to move it very steadily so we can hear the direction changes, we can hear the dynamic changes. And I was kind of just transferring what I've learned all these years as a percussionist into using these instruments that are abnormal in a way. So that's the glowing ball I was interacting with. And in fact, this ball really had no difference to the other objects I was interacting with earlier. In the video you saw, I was just making sounds out of these metal objects, these wooden pieces. But to me, they're pretty much the same. And then this is another performance that I did earlier this year at the School of Creative Media. It was presented by the Hong Kong Music Ensemble. I was working with this Lazy Susan by this artist, Viola Yip, who is a composer, but also an excellent artist who works with a lot of different mediums. And she gave me this instrument. Basically, it's a little Lazy Susan that's like, you know when you go to a dim sum restaurant, those turning tables? Exactly, those tables, but with 3 different speakers on it. And they have different size, and the feedback response is so different. I also was given a PD patch to control the feedback level, the gain level, but also adding some of the delay, reverb, and all that stuff. I was given that remotely, so she sent it to me through DHL. I received it, and then I opened it, and then, okay, this is my instrument. So I spent some time at home just kind of getting to know how to really make good sound out of it. Because to be fair, pointing a mic to the microphone, that ain't gonna sound good, honestly. So I was working around with applying different objects to turn that feedback into something that I could use musically. Yes, thank you. So as a percussionist, I work with one instrument, so a wood block. I also work with instruments that look like drums with skins on top of it, but I also work with metal instruments, for instance, like bells, glockenspiels, and all that stuff. So I have an understanding of how different objects work when I apply them to on microphones and the speakers. So I noticed that working with metal objects, and especially metal objects that create a bowl shape, would help changing the feedback and would help me to control this feedback better. So I just went to my kitchen and collected all these pans that I haven't been using and it's been rusty, and I just applied them to the speakers, and I was quite happy. To be honest, I was quite happy with this result. I was able to have my own personal contribution in this instrument that she gave me. And in fact, she gave this to 3 other artists. One of them was in Mexico, one of them was Montreal, one of them was in Scandinavia, and we had this telematic performance where my sound was actually being fed to them, and then their sound was actually being fed to in Hong Kong and being panned around another multi-channel system out there. And then sometimes it gets picked up by this mic on top too. So there's like this ongoing I guess feedback conversation dialogue going on in this instrument, and it was a lot of fun working on this. So that's the instrument. Originally when it came in, it was just like 3 speakers, And I actually also used the mic, kind of inspired by the pendulum music, where I was just like swinging the mic around, and but also working with a PD patch, because performing with so many items for an hour as a soloist is kind of difficult to, you know, really plan out or live compose what I wanted to explore. So, but as a percussionist working with large setups, small setups, I grew comfortable very soon after a few practices. And then these are some other projects that I've done before, maybe not so related, but I've worked with a chessboard as an instrument where I was just playing chess. I just played a game by memory. And because I have, I feel comfortable working in a theater setting, but also performing my own instruments, or like abnormal instruments. So I get these invitations to doing weird stuff. And also there on the right bottom, this is Gabe Bird's Keep Breathing at Zero. That happened in 21, where I was interacting with the robotic arms and stuff. But that was all programmed, so I was mostly performing as like an actor in that. And then in my other lives, I've done percussion solo where I've used body as my instrument. And then I'm going to move forward to talk about my other hat, which is as a curator at our festival Sound Forms at CMHK, Contemporary Music in Hong Kong. I like to talk about this because it is also I was just trying to figure out what my approach to mapping or multimodal mapping is. If it's somehow translating some of the translated data or understanding or experiences, and perhaps my curatorial approach is somewhere along the lines of that, because starting in 21, I was curating this festival, and I noticed that it's actually very hard to find sound artists to be part of this festival, because these days no one really calls themselves sound artists, because we don't really have a solid or concrete definition of what sound art is. So I figured out if that's the case, then that means that I don't need a sound artist to be here for a sound festival. So I started gathering these different people coming in, photographers, choreographers, visual artists, media artists, to reflect on how they would create using sound as a medium. And as a result, this is what the festival is. If you see the biggest picture over there, this is Lazarus over here, and he was actually our exchange artist to III in The Hague 2 years ago, and then he performed this work. It was an installation of this instrument he built based on the data he collected at a battery ground. And eventually he actually went to The Hague last year to do some more of that. And then on the top right corner, I had this light artist and a sound artist working together on building this instrument that uses light as a sensor to trigger sound. So he created this whole room of these instruments that would only produce sound using light, and applying these reflective materials, and have these audience standing so close to each other, but having light coming through gaps. So it kind of uses a whole room as one instrument itself. And then I also had choreographer and actually Suhi as a choreographer and Michelle as visual artists working together, finding out what intimacy means in terms of sonically, but also in touch as an intimacy. And then lastly, I also had a DJ, a vinyl DJ performance where he was collecting these old vinyls and cutting them and pasting them together again and doing this DJ set. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Don't be shy. You have a question? I have a question too.
Oh, no,
you go first. No,
you
please.
go first.
No, please.
Your question's, I bet it's smarter than mine.
You're an artist.
Thanks, Karen, for the presentation. I mean, this is great. One because I'm always amused by how interconnected everybody is, that within one presentation, half the people in the room have collaborated on. I wondered if you wouldn't mind expanding a little bit more on the Lazy Susan project and this idea of performing with somebody else's device. Like, I think there's some parallel here to part of this idea of interfaces that is popping up in different people's presentations. For example, Sam's designing an interface for another pilot to fly. Was this something you were given instructions on, or something that you just were given the object and had to work out? Maybe you could just expand on that a little bit more.
Thank you for the question. My instruction, the given instruction was actually finding my own sound in that Lazy Susan. And as percussionist, it's rather easy, but actually interacting telematically is a problem, to be honest, because me working with in-person performers for so long, but working with telematic performers is rather difficult to interact with, because you see them and you hear them with like a certain delay. It doesn't mean that you're interacting, you heard them, but all I could do interactively was to respond musically. But with Lazy Susan, I can only do so much. So for me, that seems to be a problem that have yet to be overcame, I think, because we're always craving for that in-person interaction. But I am quite curious if it's possible to actually interact remotely, telematically through an instrument and musically. And I previously, actually here last year or 2 years ago, we did this improvisation session where Roberto has this AI improvisation machine. And after that performance, I also thought about what does it mean to really interact with someone we don't know, and someone that can only be identified behind the speakers, that I have yet to figure out.
My question had to do with, and this is, from my own experience, mapping in sound in general. The possibilities are almost endless, but then people tend to opt for similar routes and similar approaches with regards to spectral content or frequency or so on. So what is your experience with people finding their own voice when they're actually mapping things? Like when you're working with someone and you say, okay, they're mapping this to this, but it still sounds like it's their own work, like they're creating their own sound world instead of all sounding the same from everyone. Yeah.
Well, I guess also kind of echoes what Samuel was trying to tackle, like your interaction with the drones, to like how much of that interaction in the space when you were at current plans, like how much of that affects you as a performer or as a person who manipulates that drone in a way. I'm also curious about how you feel about that interaction.
I feel okay.
Great.
Well, I think what I want to say is that in terms of this, like the mapping thing, yes, it does feel endless, right? And then how do you as an artist or the designer of this sound how do you land on what's appropriate for? But I think if you just think about it, okay, well, it's a medium, and you have an artwork that you want to create some sort of emotional response, or in my case with Nervous Thrasher, I wanted it to be less, maybe a little bit intellectual, but also very visceral from within. And so the types of sounds that I went for in this case were things that are tied a little bit more with cinema, because we know in cinema the score or the soundscapes that we control how we emotionally respond to the movie or the plot or the dialogue or the narrative or whatever. And so in this case, they were endless, but I still knew what I was going for. And then also to have to harmonize with the mechanical sounds of drones when they're close to you versus further away, and how that progressively changes how you hear and perceive what's going on. I intentionally, again, had to choose mappings that fit in with some of the samples I'm working with that are about drones and dronescapes. And so I feel okay. Yeah.
There's something that might come up in some of the subsequent presentations. I think there's an interesting thing here of, are there mappings that we kind of lean into out of some sort of agreement? Like I was thinking of like Vasily Kandinsky's essay on color. The guy was famously synesthetic, and so he wrote this essay about which instruments in the orchestra and what color they were, as if we all agreed, which if the guy has synesthesia, okay, maybe it's just you, buddy. But when you read it, it kind of does make sense. He's like, a trumpet is yellow or something like that, and it kind of, no? I think he was referring to like a sharp, high-pitched sound having a sort of equivalence in color. And film soundtracks might be a good example that we tend to associate certain narrative and visual experiences that it'll be interesting. I've never scored a film because I've never scored anything because I don't know anything about music, but are there go-to places? And you could maybe ask the same question in graphics. Like if you're doing a visualization of sound, are there certain techniques you'd go back to? Like last week we talked about the project with Sudi about Laba notation as like a way of codifying if we're to train a data set on what types of movements go with what type of music. Is there a sort of a go-to language that's a little bit hard to codify, but everybody who sort of works in that discipline might implicitly agree that these mappings are sort of the ones that we tend to slot into? I'm thinking of some of the conversations that Joseph and I were having on WhatsApp, where you were talking about platonic sort of underlying patterns. I wonder if this will come back, because it's a sort of a recurring theme that I think has now come up a few times. With that, I wonder if we should move on to our final presentation for this little set, which will be Kenny, is that right? Kenny? So Kenny, do you want to come up and join us, and I'll get your presentation on the screen. Quick smart.
Yes, as Peter prepares that, there's also this idea that I think is gonna reappear of visual machines. Yeah, that seems to be a contradiction, but I find quite interesting. There's a lot of research on that. So the extent to which we're thinking here of mechanical parts as an extension of the human body, as an otherness, as an enhancement, as something that we want to make visual for some reason, because it gives a kind of deeper connection with the humanness of the whole experience, or as something that we want to keep completely separate from us as a kind of alter entity that we play around with. Yeah.
Okay, so the final speaker for this session is Kenny Wong. Kenny is a founder of Things That Move and has a fascinating practice in kinetics, media art. I saw a wonderful presentation you gave at the School of Creative Media just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited for this talk, and thank you for joining us, Kenny.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kenny. So yeah, I have my own personal work, and recent years I also started my company / creative groups that we do art together. So the aim is because I do kinetic works and media works, I think there are lots of works that cannot complete by oneself. So I want to create a group that, beside doing commercial stuff like as a normal company, but we also do our own projects that because we have programmers, we have electronic engineer, and so we can do larger scale of works, or the works that could be complete in more precise way that we want. So yeah, there's some works that I grow along, I do in a partially commercial, or some work is in the art projects, but in different scale. On the top, on the bottom left side is it's a huge kinetic chandelier. It's permanent in Park Yohu in a private estate, but it helped as a commission art project, and then I work with a lot of motors and stuff. Like there are like 80 motors in the whole kinetic installation. So I have to do like a simulation or to predict how it would happen on site before that. So eventually I have developed kind of like a way that, especially in Hong Kong, there are lots of space limiters for making large scale of works. So I think for me or for my work, there are lots of relation with like simulation or drawings or the things that done on the digital and then realized on the real world, even though they are like kinetic, actual physical stuff. And yeah, so yeah, yeah, this one. So like this, every day I done a lot of drawings. The drawings that it could be for, especially this one. This one is like I make during the pandemic time, I start making robots because like before that I do a lot of large scale work that they are plugged in with power, but they are not like off as the battery stuff. And but then I started to do robot stuff and also for art and trying to find a different way. But like the similar thing for me is like doing large scale, small scale, little scale of work. I do a lot of drawings to trying to make the accuracy that allows me to, as an artwork, there are some improvisation inside the accuracy frame, or there is a frame or already a system there. So and then while during the making, I can order the changes. I can have like modules of changes. Yeah. Yeah, maybe, yeah. So this work is like doing in 2022. Yeah. So a few years ago during the pandemic, so I made an idea about remote control. Everything was being online at that time. So I have an idea about 動態 training, 康樂室. So, but in a English, it's like recreation room. D is about bringing like an old like community center, recreation center. Like in the 90s, people go to the recreation room, like the community center, to play together, right? But during the pandemic time, everything is like online, even like theater and things. Like I think a lot of things can't be done through online. So I make a work that force people going online, and here is like two games, board games. Like one is like a Novus, like Hong Kong. Another one is like a football player, football machine. And the people go there, and it's like a gallery, and people will go there and see. You can only play online. You cannot play there. You can only watch. And there is a room down there. There is like a computer room, and everything done through here is actually through online, and then go back to the room. This is just like what you see on the computer screen, actually. On the computer screen is like a game we make with Unreal Engine, and then it's like a typical multiplayer game system that we borrow from, like a server client side. So it's like an typical multiplayer game. So you have to, one is a server and it's a client. So what you go to the computer room, and then you can choose like the two different games. Like there is a one-to-one replication of the room in the game. So you navigate around the space, and then you will go to the game, and you will see the live stream from these two cameras. So actually the live stream is going through online and then going back there. So I already know, like, I wanted the people to feel the experience of doing this online, because there must be delay. And you also, during the exhibition, you will hear the sound real time, but it's also a bit of delay, but you cannot see the actual what's happening there. And the playing method is like, I've mapped all this pole into different motors. So the people use the mouse to move left and right to move the pole, and then there's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Everyone has 4 pole. You can only select 2 of them. So you can shoot like 1, 2, 1, 4, 1, 3. It's like what you do in both hands, right? And then people have to go mouse left and right to play the game. And translating from the real game, like virtual game, and then with a real football machine table, there are a lot of changes and a lot of things like during the test, and like at the corners, like where the ball going there in the corners, it will get stuck. Like usually what we do playing the football player, we just put back the ball, right? And then I have to do it like, you could do it online, and then I have put the corners, like 3D print some corners to avoid the ball to go to the corners. And also there is like I have to tilt the whole table. I have to make the whole structure to tilt the table so that there is like a actuator, and then you can press the space bar to shake the table. So when actually the 2 player playing the as a player, actually there always a point that's stuck because they are circular movement, and there is like the ball is always sometimes it's stuck. So you can press the space bar to shake the table online. Huh? Yeah, it's a new function. So the function has to be added for the online player to play the game. So there's yeah. So yeah, the whole table. And also I have to think about how to reset the game. You know, you go online, you just quit the game, and then you quit, right? So I have to think the whole thing, how to be resetted. So the whole table will incline to a place. So I've made like these 2 holes, and then I 3D printed some parts, so they have the pipe. So on both sides, they will go back to here to collect the balls. And there's like a pile of balls, like the staff have to put back when there is like empty. So I have to make it really complicated, and yeah. So I want to, in this project, I want to prove like, okay, we have to go online, things will work, but not like in a fun way, like, so in a tedious way. So just a little sample of like this live stream. I go using like WebRTC to stream online. There's an online server and a streaming back. So there's like a half or a few 100 milliseconds of delay, and also on the control. And then it makes the whole game a bit more difficult. And there's the novice game, and you have to use the robot arms to play the game. And a lot of 3D printing stuff, like this all chest, like the puck is like printed. There is like a metal at the inside, so I can use the electromagnet to attract them, to collect them. And yeah. So the people have to play through like the interface, and making the whole thing like restarting the game is like the entire thing that make the people go back like to the physical state to watch them, because a lot of people want to see how it's going to reset. And then actually I have to destroy the whole Nova's table and the edge, and then I add a motor there. And then so everything incline, and then there is like a, you know, like what you see in a supermarket, like, and then all the part will go there, and the staff have to put it back whenever it's like empty. Yeah. Okay. So this is how the robot arm works. It works, but it's super slow. Like you play the entire game, like I think you can finish in an hour. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, some people really finish the game like they trying like for half an hour and they give up eventually. So this like the virtual world, you walk around as a multiplayer, and then in the actual gallery space, I recreate some portion of like recreation room, like community center, a feeling of community center. So I recreate this the gallery in the Unreal Engine. So you see there's also the QR code for the for that time of pandemic. Okay. So another project is Somium. I was part of the installation artist. So I work with Steve and also Karen as one of the performer, and it's like almost like 2 years of development. And this is one of the installation that I made. It's actually a replica of a moon. Is part of the story, and this moon is like it's a 4-meter huge installation that it has two modes that it has also a speaker inside, and when it lights up in the middle, you will see what is inside, and then when it lights up from outside, it's another kind of sculptural form. So it's a huge calculation that it actually looks like the structure is like you can say it's like a football. It combines of like hexagon and hexagon, and then I mapped the whole. I used the NASA image of the moon, and then turn the display map into different size of holes to represent them. So and then there is like 180 of triangles to form this whole ball, and then we have to laser cut all the panels. So the installment of the whole thing is like, so we use like Houdini to generate all these patterns. So it's from the map. Yeah, and another side of this project is like there is an opera show, and the opera show is like there are 6 opera that already pre-recorded with the video, and then we made a robot that represent these 6 opera singer, and they will walk around in the gallery space. So I make these 6 robots that automate. They are like those vacuum cleaner robots. They recognize spaces, they know where they are, and then they will walk around in the space. And these are the projection from the test that we were working on. So these are the robots. And the development of the robot, like because this is an opera, so we have to develop like a system that they can synchronize the 6 robots to play the video together. So we use like like syncing the time with the internet. We use the NTP server to sync the time, so they have to be frame accurate. So I use the Rickroll to test the video. Sorry about the Rickroll. Yeah. So we have to synchronize the time so that the 6th singer is like in sync, and through even they are remotely through Wi-Fi throughout the space. And you see the robot is based on this little base, and then with like the LiDAR and the things, and then there's a little computer inside. It's like a NVIDIA computer, so they can do they kind of run like the robotic system. It's called ROS, and it's an open source robotic system. So we develop from that. And sorry about the Rickroll. Yeah, and then we keep testing on the robots, like starting from 1 and 2, and then keeping different situation, obstacles, and tons of time of testing, tuning, and we make the markings if they can go accurately, repeatedly going through the space. So and then we verify that, and then we eventually develop the robot with each robot with a projector, they project the opera singer in the space. Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah, next slide. Okay. And also, yeah, about this somium, and then there's an instrument that I've developed, and actually it's a replica of a moon, and then Karen plays with the moon, and in the theater space, she's the only one that can control the sound, the direction of the sound with the instrument, and actually there's there are accelerometer inside the ball, and there's like a battery, and then when there is a motion that feels like a motion, they will grow, and then that's how it is. So it's sent through the OSC in the theater, and then it will control the sound system in the theater space. Oops. Okay. So this is how it looks like. And maybe I go through one more project. So this is a very recent project that I'm working on, and it's also going through a few years. And actually, this is a building that will be going at a central. Like there is a permanent project I'm working with an architect. There's a media like a light installation in a space. So this is like the rendering, like a few years ago. There is like no actual space, so we have to go through how to make an installation through there. So I make a simulation inside an Unreal Engine, because Unreal Engine has like very accurate, kind of accurate light simulation and a simulation of the real space. So this is the installation, and the installation is actually contains of those called like power glass, and the glass is like embedded with a different light matrix, but they are not like they are just like different light matrix. So there are like in total there are 58 of glass, and there's like this kind of hidden wires, but there's light embedded inside. There's individual controllable. So in total there's like 100,000 of lights to be controlled. So we have to make the system to map the whole space. You see the scale of the work here. It's working. We are still working on it, and so we control the whole thing through like we make a system that in a touch designer that simulate all the glass panel, because all glass panel is individual and it's different height and different things. So we have to. Our aim is like able to make a straight line through these things, and then theoretically, and we already map it right. And this is all the panels and all the different sizes, and then we have to figure out the wiring, and then the signal actually is like a normal stage level DMX signal, but we have to go through like 100,000 of pixels. So we have done a mock-up test. This is one of the two panels, and then we done during the space, and then okay, we only have these two panels to verify the whole installation. So we run through like the control system. It's like the final system is through Touch Designer, but actually we simulate the whole thing in the Unreal Engine to test if our theory was right. So yeah. So it was running in real time, and controlling two they actually need two GPU on the same, two graphic card on the same computer to run that, and because like it's running an engine and also running a control system. And yeah.
I think, how are we for time? Let's just check. We started late, so we'll have to add a few minutes.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, I can go one more project. And also this project, I collaborate with Rooftop Production. They are a theater company, and also collaboration with West Kowloon Free Space. So we developed this presence, this this little robot for like a few years already, and this is like the latest version, and it happened last year, and it actually is an online, also an online telepresence kind of thing, and then we every audience they have like they can. You're like going to the theater, but you buy the tickets and then you go online. There's like a web portal, and the whole thing is through the web portal, and then you can use like WASD, like playing the games, and you can control this car. We can have a little clip there.
Presence is an online platform where audiences can join performances remotely anywhere in the world and interact with the space physically. When you join a performance in Presence, you'll find yourself in a 3D world. You can begin to explore and get used to the controls. It feels like any other online game. You can chat with other audience members and drive into all the objects. When the performance begins, the portals will open. Each portal takes you to a different real-world destination. When you enter a portal, you assume control of a robotic vehicle in the real world, but with the same controls and perspective as the 3D game world. You can leave the space at any time and return to the 3D world. From there, you can visit all the different destinations whenever you want. There are a variety of places to visit. A beach, a university hall of residence, a community garden, a rooftop by the harbor, and inside someone's home.
So basically you have a car with microphone, and you can also talk through your speaker.
You can interact with by pressing X.
And there's like tasks, you have to go through the 5 spaces.
Who you can talk to directly. If you ask them, they will give you objects or tasks that will lead you to discover other places.
So the car, actually, there are 5 person, or I remember more than 5, more than 5 person, I think around 6 to 8 person, you can play through the whole game, but actually, there are only 5 cars in each location. But if there are 5 players, we have to make 15 cars. Actually, there are 15 cars in different places, so each location has 5. So you go through the web, like the virtual space for us, and then you can go to different spaces. It's actually another car. So actually we have built like 15 cars, and the car has like, you can have a microphone, and this is like the app that developed by the rooftop. So the people can speak through the web, and then it will speak. So the people can speak by themselves, they can discuss, and they can call. And you see there is a little fun thing. There is like a 小林退熱貼 here. Because during the outside, during the outdoors, the phone goes really hot. It goes 5G. It goes like the speakers, and it's like for those fevers, like the cooling pads. On the 小林退熱貼on the it's like the last minute solutions, and it works. And this is like a very early test. We use like also web RTC to do the data streaming, also do the controls. So it has to be very real time. It's not like the recreation room. It has to be very real time, and otherwise it's out of control. And everything we use 5G to do the live stream and also do the things. And the development was painful, and the duplication and the things. And yeah, we actually hacked very cheap gimbal, because the gimbal, like you can, and then we hacked the buttons to make it like like a actual gimbal. So you see a stabilized video on through the web portal. So it's like development help, so a lot of 3D printing. Because also we have to avoid like people going crazy, like bumping car game. So we have to create bumpers and things, avoid the people, and we also make like a lot of avoidance to make to avoid the people to going crazy with the car. And we actually, a lot of 3D printings, a lot of assemble and wiring and stuff like that. So there's like a cheap Chinese gimbal, and then we hacked it to make it able to control like power up and then up, down, left, right. You can control up, down, left, right in the camera. And so you can speak with the actor. There's like missions, then tasks that you can play, and then you go to different spaces. There's like a button that there's like the actor can push, and then it will send the signal back to the server, and then they know you've got some kind of task or some kind of objects inside space. And actually, we also put like there's a RFID receiver, like in front of each car. Actually, we have some RFID tag around the space, like this little flag, and to avoid the people go out of the boundary or giving mission. When they reach out there, it's like there's an RFID, and the web will pop up. There's something you can do. So this is the RFID sender, and then this is like the RFID tag. And making a huge RFID create like radio frequency, radio interferences, so you have to wrap the signals to make it okay to work and everything. And also there's like I think there are six this kind of LiDAR sensor to check like the people, to avoid people going crazy, like bumping into walls and things. So when the people go to the wall, and then they will stop the car. And it creates lots of wiring and signals talking through the motors and other things. So actually we have to use like free microcontroller to do all the things. Yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you. Yep. Okay, Kenny, thank you so much. Do you want to take a seat? So right now, I'll take a few questions on Kenny's presentation, and then we'll have a short discussion wrapping things up. And because we started a little bit late, we might have the discussion period a little shorter, do you think? Yeah. Just so we can try to keep on track, because after the break, we'll have our presentation by Vvzela. But first of all, are there any questions for Kenny? Samuel, you look like you've got itchy fingers.
Yeah, I have a question, but it's not like a really deep question. It's an engineering question that's quite niche, and maybe the audience doesn't care, but I'm very curious. On your first of all, the Presence project, it's surrounded by the time of flight sensor. From my experience, I have a lot of interference on the data sets that are accumulated through the time of flight sensors when they're exposed to sunlight, that the sunlight, the ambient world creates a lot of noise. Can you tell me or describe how you worked with those vehicles in sunlight with those sensors?
You've got a microphone.
Yeah, right.
It's not really deep, I know.
At the first, I have to choose those with able to do the outdoor. Yeah. There are some outdoor LiDAR. Yeah. So they already block the UV lights, I think. Yeah. So I have also have a robot that also work with it's like a LiDAR. There's an outdoor grade, and then they already have the UV filter. I think they work. Yeah. So for this one, I was extra. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll pop over. This is just unless you want to point to something.
Thank you. I want to know, you have the fantastic the projects. From scratch to the products, which stage to you is the, you spend most of time, which stage is the most difficult or the time you spend most on it? Can you share with us?
Spend most on it. Most time consuming. I think this depends on the project, but a lot of project is like the drawings. Because I will make sure all the drawings, all the things like fit into the space or fit into each other, and I would spend a lot of time like doing I have like hundreds version of like drawings, like the version is going to version 2000, not 500. It could be there. Yeah, I think finding all the elements, putting together, and then test individual elements, and then put in the drawings, and then make sure everything works together is the most time consuming for me. And the assembly part usually like a replicating process. So I think it's comparatively less time consuming. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience?
And also like the planning time will help on the production time a lot. Yes, yes.
I had one question, and then we might give everybody a rest and a glass of wine before you kill us for talking for too long. I had a question about, I was trying to think of the right word, the stickiness or the ease of interaction in your works, because the first work that was like the COVID remote game work, I think COVID did strange things to every media artist, because you have to start doing remote telemetry works. And it looked like these games that you've recreated, you were almost showing us how annoying it is to play games when you can't be there. Whereas in the later work, you were really optimizing it to try to make it feel good for people. In those two works, or in general, do you find there's a shift between making things where you want the interface to feel difficult or to notice it, and then works where you want it to sort of feel easy and smooth and to not notice it? And is it like a different type of work?
I think it's like the fun or the curious part is like to reconfigure your control for both works also as well. Yeah, it's something you're familiar, but you also, even if it's like easier to control, but it's still, you have a learning curve, or you have to familiar with the interface, and it changing the interface also change how you behave, because like during the online world, and then people can behave really differently. And we have audience like playing music all the time with the speaker during the robot, and then without speaking anything. So they have their own behavior, and we know who he are, and then he has a different personality during the online experience. So
you need like a server moderator to kick people off the server.
Yes, yes. I think yeah, the most interesting part for me is the change of like how you experience the same thing, even on the location, or the how the exact game, how it works.
Okay. Okay. Hi everybody. So welcome back to the Metamaps Workshops. My name is Peter Nelson. Joining me is Roberto, Alonso, Trillo, and of course Wong, who we haven't introduced yet today. I'm sorry. Wong is one of our amazing curator who is working with us on the project. Thanks, Wong. Okay, so next up we have the artist Vvzela Kook. I've known Vivi's practice for some time in Hong Kong, going back a few years. Vivi, I've known her work primarily for her animations, and more recently getting to know her drawings, but particularly her use of storytelling and her way of sort of moving through narrative ideas and expressing them out through different mediums coming together as quite immersive and really communicative installations. I try to give very short introduction, so I'll leave it at that, and then Vivi can walk us through her practice. Just give me one moment, I'll get rid of our splash screen and bring up your presentation. Just a second. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for introduction, and thank you for inviting me here, and nice to meet you all. So, like Peter just explained, that I'm a media artist that mainly work in animation and some other stuff to create a whole storytelling experience, sometimes immersive, sometimes not. But today okay, let's go to this. So these are mainly the screen capture of the animation I will do. So they're like computer animations, procedure animations. Yeah, but we're not.
Oh, okay, sorry, maybe I got it. Give me a second. Where's my cursor?
Okay, it's working now? Yeah. And then beside animation, I will put it into a exhibition situation. For example, this is Ichigo Tsunmari, Hong Kong House last year, and also a project I did in Oil Street Art Space about land reclamation in Hong Kong, and also this one about plant imperialism, and this one is I did it kind of like sci-fi story based on Kowloon Walled City, and some of the screen captures you saw here and here are from this work. And sometimes I do include interactive stuff in my work as well. And in this installation I did in Parasite in 2020, I got one room. This actually the space beside at the left of this pink wall. It goes there's a once you get into the small room, and there's a projection screen hanging, and then a conveyor belt. And on the projection screen it says "lie down on the belt." So the audience, once per time, is encouraged to actually lie down on this conveyor belt. And by lying down, the camera actually will detect, okay, something's moving, and then they will auto play a video for a duration of 3-4 minutes. And after the video when the video is about to done, the conveyor belt will activate and slowly actually carry this person to the space outside this wall. And then also this installation I did in Shanghai Gai in a recently renovated shopping mall, neighborhood shopping mall. It's called Empty Space, which we also have a lot of, 5 of these cameras installed on the side of the space. And then it actually covers all the white carpet space that audiences are encouraged to move the white cubes with patterns on it. And then when the camera sees the pattern, also we have the pre-programmed and AI learning of the pattern. So we have this once the camera sees the pattern, okay, it gets how to say it. So this one is a road barrier. So it will have a road barrier 3D model in this screen. So actually audience can actually build a city based by moving around these white cubes. So these are the some of the work I usually do, and some of the forms I usually take when it comes to the exhibition situation I'll present. But today I want to mostly show, like Peter said, I've been drawing much recently. And to begin with, this is work I did in 2019 when I did the residency in Nuremberg. When I was visiting the Toys Museum in Nuremberg, I saw actually they are very common in playground in Hong Kong as well, that there are some rollers installed in the beside this slider, and some like parts for the kids that have patterns on it, and you can actually roll it to combine a kind of shape. So actually did this kind of rollers, and then have like some 36 drawings. So they are like hexagon shaped rollers. We have like 6 drawings on each one of them, and have 6 combined in the set. We have like 36 drawings on it. So the audience can actually roll the rollers to combine a story. And then in the drawings, there are like, because I was doing a residency in Nuremberg, so I was researching into some of Nazi history, and then also like to my own interest at that point, the disaster of Chernobyl nuclear reaction, and also like adding some bit of Hong Kong. So I put timelines, milestones of like how the history happens, or how the incidents developed, like stage by stage. So, for example, I take Chernobyl as an example, that when the situation occurred, so Pripyat is where the Chernobyl reactor locates in Ukraine. So when the incident happens, all the device that can read the level of radiation, it goes to 36. And then the unit actually is called sievert. It's a kind of unit to calculate how much radiation you get, like daily basis, or per hour. So on the flight from Hong Kong or Taipei to the west coast of North America is 0.09 millisievert. And here the read goes up to 3.6, and later they realized that all the regions near Pripyat, we have maximum radiation of 3.6, is because the device goes only up to 3.6. And then in reality, when they find a kind of like more precise and more capable machine, the read is actually 15,000. And then here, this is kind of a drawing to explain. There were a trendy type of reactor that developed by US. It's called Vvzela kind of reactor. And then because it was American technology and it's much expensive to build, and then the Soviet Union scientists, they developed their own reactors called RBMK. And then they claim that this type of reactor is so safe that they can build in Moscow. And then this explains a kind of like incident that was no casualty back then in 1981. The Chernobyl was in 1984, and this was like some years before the Chernobyl. Is called power excursion. Is kind of the same type of incident that kind of caused the Chernobyl incident. But back then, there was no report. There was no like solution or explanation was given when this happened to another reactor. So in order to, some drawings are actually from this installation. And what I want to explain mainly today is, from my background, I was like, have nothing to do with all this reactor and this like physicist and like this kind of stuff. But in order to learn this, and I read lots of books, of course, and search online, and in order to understand, I did a lot of like research drawings, and this is one of them. And this helps me to understand that, like graphically, how a reactor, that kind of reactor, behaves like normal, or right before the disaster, or after, like on the time of explosion. And beside this, it also sometimes what I did this is sometimes I will be a little bit like frustrated when I read something. I don't understand it, especially when it comes to a kind of like complicated concept like this. I read it, and on that time I understand it, but like a few days later, when I want to record it and kind of like use it in the drawings or in other works, it becomes like very frustrated. Okay, I forgot it, or like months later, I even forgot like from which book I read it. So I spent much of time like re-digging it out. So like after like 5 years, when I see this few pages of drawings, like from the very beginning, like how like nuclear reactor works, and like the red lines are like for the uranium fuel, like to support the nuclear fission, to create, to make the reaction goes faster, and then all the blue ones like boron, water, and all those stuff to cool down the reactor. So when I like get back to these drawings, it reminds me of what I learned. So, and this one also, in another example, when I was doing another work, I read this book by Zygmunt Bauman. I got this one. It's not from Liquid Modernity, it's from Wasted Lives, another book. Is that I feel so much while reading this one, like how do you stay open to business and close to people? Ask client. Client is a journalist, and the one who answers is a politician from US. He says, easy, first you expand the parameter and then you lock down. And from this, it explained like how in detail it works, and then I did this drawing, like how, like in order to get free trade, you like expand the border and then you lock down and you incorporate. So, yeah, so so basically I use this kind of like drawing to really understand and process information. And then another example is a work I did with Kwun, another Hong Kong-based artist, for Kwun. It's called Digital Interpretation of the Architecture and History of Victoria Jail, and is commissioned by History Department of Kwun, which means that all the stuff we need, we actually incorporate in this work. It must be like history that really happened in Kwun. It cannot be imagination. It cannot be like implications that did not happen in Kwun. So to begin with, yeah, I also did a lot of drawing, and the subject is Kwun. So in order to learn it, I started from the architecture, from the structure of Kwun itself, and then very soon I realized that in order to understand the prison system and the idea of prison, the idea is embedded in the structure itself. So, yeah, I started to draw the structures that specifically I found like very outstanding in that situation. And during the research, I encountered a series called Toughest Prison in the World in Netflix series. And I'm not gonna explain, but just go through the images. Yeah, I guess you know what I mean. By drawing this, by seeing this, actually, I feel that like all the physical movement we're doing are like restricted by the space or by the structure of the building. Say, for this one, this could be like two men playing something on the ground. And then here, it's like, oh, he have to do this in order to, show his kindness or to try to be equal, because the other one has only can speak like this. Or when someone is incarcerated in this like black room and there was only like this big hole, and then this journalist and then this person who did produced the whole show visited him, and this is the only way he could approach the prisoner. And then based on this research, we did one of the scene in that project. So basically, we have like 12 scenes going on in this like 4 walls of projection, and most of them actually have interaction. Is that when you're trying to approach and something happens or something stops happening. For example, when you try to approach this one, and this is outer facade of the Kwun, and there's actually cat moving around, moving in like stray cats in Kwun, actually in a lot of prisons in Hong Kong still now. And then when you approach, the barbed wire will appear, and then it will block the way. And then in some other scenes that in the prison kitchen, looks like very normal kitchen and people are working. And when you approach, they stop the working and look back at you with a like blank face. And then this one is called Sally Port. You can actually see it in Kwun on the 3rd floor of Block D. That this is the port, this is the place where they actually distribute pills for the female prisoners. That when you approach, the officer will come, and then he will like walk from that way and sit here and then start to distribute the pills. And in this case, in this structure, it's very ambiguous to see who is actually being kept in this structure. Like Peter said, like beside all the animations and all the installation I did in the exhibition situation, I actually enjoy a lot doing sketches, and it is kind of like a approach to process information, and through this process to convert the informations from the text from the book, from like Netflix series and videos into something I could incorporate in the works. I think that's it. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, okay, first of all, are there any questions from the audience for Vvzela? Okay, Roberto?
I have a question. Okay. Thank you. That was very interesting. So I guess, my question, maybe it's an open question or too open. We're thinking of mapping here, and when I look at your practice, a drawing is a map in a way, a text can be a map, a mnemonic device that you come back to. So the idea that multimodal mapping is not something that happens within the kind of digital realm, but it's something that we engage with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And I guess that as artists, that's part of practice. It's a matter of translating things. So, I've seen some of this before, and I don't know if maybe you could expand on that process where you go from your initial relationship maybe with painting and so on into developing some of the 3D models and graphics that you do, and how does your mind work as an artist there? What is the kind of process behind that? Do you usually start drawing first? Is that more of an intuitive approach to mapping, and then move into the digital, or
Yeah, there are some like very functional purposes when it comes to drawing, like the Jumbo restaurant project. So yeah, I didn't put it here because that's another project that's been developing. So basically, the Jumbo floating restaurant that's been like drowned into the South Sea 2 years ago. So I did a work with like also can categorize into like interactive game situation that basically the audience can have a like use a joystick to navigate under the sea to like observe a drowned Jumbo restaurant. So before it was drowned, and I took lots of photos, like hundreds of them, more than 1,000 photos of the Jumbo restaurant in case I might need it in the future. And then later, when I had a like situation that I can develop works based on Jumbo restaurant, I start to do a lot of drawings, like in very detail, not this. This is to understand the situation, but like in very detailed level of drawings, which I could understand the structure of the Jumbo restaurant, like architectural structure and how it was built and how the shape and then all that. So after done this set of drawings, I started to build the 3D model. It's not like that I have to build a 3D model by myself. It's not available online anywhere. So this is one important purpose. So guess I wouldn't imagine me like just start by like watching the photos, take the photos only for the reference without absorbing the structure with my own hand. That would be like a much painful, I would presume, process to like transform a relatively complicated structure like Jumbo from the photos to 3D model. Yeah, and another purpose is like what you see right now is like, yeah, help to understand. And also, what I missed to put is that a set of like, can we go back to the last one? Do I have this? Yeah, so, yeah, I did this one, yes. So this work is actually where the artists who actually proposed idea, and then there were like two production companies to help us realize all the details, 3D models, all this like interactive stuff. So this drawings actually helps a lot for the production company to actually get what we want to do. Yeah, this is another like very practical purpose. But to me, what I feel like very recently from last year is that it's very hard for me, although as a media artist, to say that I gain energy, like inner energy from doing animation, because that to me is like a very output process. It's draining me, although it's very enjoyable to see the like output, see how it realized. But for me, as yeah, it's kind of like draining. It's all output, but somehow like drawing as a form of output is actually gives me a lot of energy. So that's the reason why I want to like talk about mainly on drawing today, is that I've been drawing rhinos recently for like half a month. Yeah, so drawing animals, and then of course that's a research process for my upgoing project. But yes, through this, it might not be used as research drawing because that's really like literally just animal without like further like other informations or diagrams and all that. But through the process, it's kind of helped me to combing the things, if that's the word. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classical terrible question / comment. It's picking up on, we had a talk earlier this year at HKBU in the 360 Cinema about slightly different. It was artists who use computer graphics in world building, but this topic of drawing came up a little bit. And I'm thinking of, again, I keep referencing these short messages that Joseph was sending me earlier in the week, and as he's our next presenter, I want to build a bit of a link of drawing as potentially, and you can agree or disagree, in one way as a filter, as you know, there's an experience, and somehow I think a lot of computer graphic software and its ability to handle so much data can be very, very noisy. Like, to me, aesthetically, there's nothing uglier than a 3D scan. It's just too much noisy, terrible data. There's no elegance of its topology or of its shape in the way that it would be if it had been drawn. That to draw something requires this filtering of a huge amount of information into something that can get close to a concept. And I think, Joseph, that was something that that I think you might be talking about in this process of representation between what gets fabricated and what the idea is and how this process works together. And I completely sympathize that to jump straight into 3D software, it's noisy, there's too much. And so thinking of like functions like a filter or a sorting algorithm or something, would you use this sort of language to describe drawing, as if there's some unarticulated idea, and that drawing, like, how would you describe it as that function that's going between you and then these outputs that exhibition-wise we might see of yours, these sort of colorful, color-ramped computer graphics, but in the middle there's this process. Do you think that's fair, or would you like describe it in a slightly different way?
Firstly, I didn't realize this before when I was talking about it, but like, I feel like when it comes to drawing, it's so pragmatic to describe drawing as functional. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to draw, you just start drawing. It's not like, okay, this line of code, what's that? The function of that line of code, what's the function of that parameter? So, but I understand, I'd agree with you on that, I mean, Joseph, yeah. When it comes to, because when I actually drawing it, I actually don't feel it so much, but I participate in a book production last year. It's actually a book about birdcage making. And then my role in that book is totally as an illustrator, like book illustrator. It has nothing to do with all the stuff you see. So, so I need to draw the shops in the Bird Street in Mongkok. And then the book writer told me the reason he wanted to draw instead of taking photos, because in that kind of like intangible heritage books that's been like widely published in Hong Kong, very trendy this year, they have a lot of like almost all the occasions they have like photos of the shop and the photo of this shop owner or person like doing his own things. He said, because in a picture, there are lots of things happening, especially in the shops in Hong Kong. By using illustration, well, by drawing, you emphasize what you want to deliver in this case to the audience. So, for example, he just wanted to say, like this person doing this procedure of the craft in the shop. So we could be like emphasize this person doing this like without all the background. Yeah, this is. Yeah, kind of like recapping what you said. Yeah, another is like, yeah, just like I want to draw, then I draw. Yeah.
I want to draw, and so I draw. Also a pretty good description. What we might do, should we move on to the next presentation? Yes. Okay, so our next presenter, thank you so much, Vvzela. Let's give her a round of applause. Vivi can stay here. So our next presenter is Joseph Chan. I've come across Joseph's work many times in Hong Kong in exhibition, but I only know really a small amount of his practice, so I'm really excited for this presentation, and I hope I haven't been misrepresenting our WhatsApp chat so far, so please feel welcome to counter or clarify any of my interpretations. I've known Joseph's work for these magnificently exquisite kinetic and mechanical constructions. However, there will be a depth to his practice that I certainly don't know, and for those of you, you might know his practice well, or you might know it not at all. But I think this will be a fascinating presentation. Joseph, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us today. We're very grateful. And just let me know when I should play a video.
Great. And thank you, MBow, for inviting me. And that's the most important part of my presentation. Okay.
Come on.
Okay, so hi there, and let me remind all of us that today is Saturday, so please a bit relax. And you are welcome to interrupt me anytime, just not too often. And for the start, yeah, and my presentation will be a bit relaxed and casual, that I will just review my work and also use my work as an example to respond to the topics of today. And so I will not go too deep into the making of my works, but if you are interested, you are very welcome to ask me any questions about my work, of course. Next, yeah, great. So I make kinetic things. So I make them as mechanical, and I'm avoiding use, in my work, I avoid the use of electronics and some circuits behind it, because I wanted to show the principle and the mechanisms and all of them to the audience. And I will explain this later and why I'm doing this. Hopefully it will be presented later in my presentation too. So first of all, let's look at my previous work. This is some clock machines, and it is not an ordinary work, but ordinary clock, but instead it's counting for a chaotic time. So in a regular clock, we have some regular mechanism to count time for the tick-tock, but this one, I have some interesting mechanism so that the tick and tock is rather chaotic. So, and yeah, and it looks good for me. So I am having fun for making this. And I think for my works, I always consider them as my toys. So I always have fun when I make my works. And this one, yeah, and the next one is some dinosaur-like things, because I like dinosaurs. And this works, it is first of all outdoors, and then the audience can sit there and ride on the dinosaur thing, and there are chimes inside and hit the rib of this dinosaur, and it will make some noise, and that noise is quite loud. It can be heard, I think, as far as 100 meters away. And because the metal is so hard, so I consider it is a hard metal sound. Okay, no one laughs. I'm such a bad joke teller. Okay, and then you can see the scale of this. Yeah, and this, I think she is one of the model when they shooting, but she is not doing her job well, obviously. because she is so attracted to this sculpture, so I forgive her. Okay, another one of my work is some mechanical bird, and I make this because I love birds. So, and you can see all of my works, the mechanics is exposed, so you can see all the inner workings of my works. Yeah, so please play video 1.
Both of them?
Yeah, V1 first, yep. Thanks. Yep. So this is my work, and you can see here, it is not moving very regularly. It is on and off, running and stop. It is show the chaotic ticking, the nature of it. And you can see very complicated clockworks here. And okay.
I just put them on like a A-B.
Nice. Will we return to video 1?
Just check out some videos.
Thanks.
Let's see what happens first. If not,
Sure. So you can see all of the stuff here. I make them because it is good looking and it doesn't have any deep meaning, so don't think too much of it. Yeah, here. And because I think black and gold is quite cool, so I make it so. And there's not some meaningful thing inside it. But I put a lot of efforts to make all these things work. Here, the rear part is some chimes, some brass chimes. So when it is about time, which I don't know exactly when, then it will, the hammer will hit the chimes. So it will make some noise again. Let's back on today's topics, because actually I was invited to talk about this, right? but it seems it is only me to talk it quite obviously. So I guess we already covered about the concept of such mapping last week, right? Yep. So I will use this model to as a reference framework and analytical framework to look at my previous work, some of my previous work. I choose this model not only because this is exactly what this topic is about, and also because the professor, his name is the most easiest to pronounce. Okay, next. McCormack, right? Yes. Okay, so in his framework, we have some data, and we do some mapping, and then devise, and we perceive it. So in my previous work, I help a lot of artists to do a lot of device work exactly like that. Some of the example I will show here. This is back some years ago, and we work as a team with Exceed, the art group Exceed, and we designed a device like a harness. So this device actually will detect what data is about the location of where you are about in a gallery. So when you go, when you're at an exact place, some location, then it will trigger the device to play you some curatorial comments on the works. And also, it has a clock here to somehow to give you some pressures to make you run faster. I don't know why, don't ask me. And the harness, I designed this thing is a bit like steampunk style. And the things you see here is actually a contact headphones. So this is one of the device. This is me. And you see my happy face here. And we are installing the harness for the audience, for the visitor here. And so you can see a very clear process here. We harness data, and then we map into some, in some way, and to present it and to play it with the audience. And another example is we make a lot of art device to represent data or represent some contents into some visual form. So here is some, I think it is quite ordinary, and I don't think I need to explain what this is, right? So this is a device visualize some things. And also you can see a lot of mechanical details here. So it is quite fun to look at too. So the content is not only the data, the relationship is not only between data and the audience, but also the device itself sometimes, especially when we do it in an art form. So the device itself sometimes in art is not that transparent. We sometimes notice this too, this thing and also this harness. So the device itself is, in this case, in such case, is not transparent. And yeah, and this is another example, just some visual device. And another device I made is some knob. And this is actually very common in the art world, because in exhibition we use a lot of them just in different forms. And this one. So this is a turning knob I designed for an artist. And you can see the structure is laminate structure, because it is modularized to make the haptic feedback in a lot of different ways. First of all, I have a wheel that has a lot of slots in the wheel and have a ball bearing to click between them, so it creates some clicking feedbacks, and also a degree limiter here, and also some friction wheel, so you can have a very nice damping feeling of the turn. So this is made to be a quite robust turning knob for an exhibition. And of course, we have some electronics here too. And this device, when I designed it, I designed this to be modularized. So when I need different angle, I can switch between the plates to have different functions of this turning knob. And of course, we also have a very nice push button at the center too. So you can see this one. It's made of brass, and these are stainless steels. And, oh, by the way, here, I forgot to mention, by that model, the mapping model, we can go from the data to the human. And also another way around is from human and mapping to the data. So it adds an input device and output device. And also, we also have some device goes in both ways, like this. I made this 12 years ago. This little toy, this little device. Turn out these things don't have any actual use. So this is really just a toy, but a lot of electronics and wiring, of course. This is actually, maybe some of you may recognize this. This is an active fader. So an active fader is a fader that you can, Darth Vader. So this is an active fader that you can input an analog data, and also it can output its position because it has a motor. So I don't know why I make this, because it's just for fun. And really, turned out after all this year, we have no practical use of this device. Yeah, and by that time, I used Max MSP to control and interface with this one. Do we still use Max MSP nowadays?
Yeah, some people do, yeah.
Old people, right?
Old people.
Yeah, not me. So yeah, we can see how it works. So here, you can see it is also a ghost detector. So it detects some spiritual things and it moves itself. Yeah, it means there are several ghosts nearby, signal. So you can see, we are quite afraid. So we don't know who is talking, but it seems that it responds to the sound. So you can see a little bit of the sine wave. And you can see showing the input part here. Input and output. So you really know by this video, you really know it really has no practical use. We really don't know why we make this. yeah, we want to make the machine sad. Okay, totally impractical. So now, but I guess this device actually is quite fitted the model of how data and the realistic work is mapping each other. Okay, that's all. So yeah, that's so fast. So I have some reflection on this framework. Is that in multisensory mapping, it is all about human, the relationship between human and data through some device and mapping process. And in multimodal mapping in art, it, as I understand, is actually from a media A, and then we extract some kinds of data or some essence from media A, and we do some mappings and apply it to media B. I have some example of it. Oh, didn't mean too much. For example, when we have an art about dance, we have a dancer, then we may take a record of the dancer, and we extract the data, maybe the gesture or the rhythm of the dancing, and use those data to recreate some other works like an animation or a projection or something, or music, because we actually see a lot of works make like that. Is maybe from some dance, and then we make that dance and into another art form like music and video art. And so, as I think more about it, it is actually media A, for example, a dance. We have the first interpretation. Because for a dance, this happen in the real world, and there's a lot of aspect. For example, the body figure of the dancer, his or her costume, and of course, dance rhythm and the gesture, all kinds of it. But in the first interpretation, we actually choose certain essence from it, but not all. So in this mapping process, we actually go through the first interpretation. We choose data. We choose data, and then we map it into another media. But when we get the data, for example, the rhythm, how we use the data, the rhythm, to map into another art form, for example, an animation, it is another interpretation. So actually, it is quite typical process, but actually when we think more about it, it seems it goes through actually two interpretations by the creator. And I think this interpretation is maybe intentional or unintentional, but nevertheless, it reflects the background of the creator. Maybe his or her preferences when looking things, and also his or her expertise in doing art. So it reflects the background of the creator, intentionally or not, because a lot of artists are unintentional to do their works. Like me, because I already mentioned a lot of time, I do my works for fun. So I rather think it is unintentional, but nevertheless, it reflects my background. Why I'm making some clockworks, why I'm making dinosaurs, why I'm making birds, it reflects my background. And my background is also reflecting the current culture and the world. So it is related to all of us. And I think the interpretation and the data, we actually, in the process, media A and media B, we extract the essence of media A. And from this model, actually, media A and media B is point to the same essence. But the difference is only when media A, you put a perspective A, maybe a dance, it has a perspective of rhythm. Media A and media B maybe is video. Just look at the same rhythm, the same essence, but in different perspective. So in multimodal mapping in art, I think the model is like this. We look, the most important part is actually the essence. If we extract from both media, the original one and the reinterpreted one. And this is an example, a dance and an abstract projection. This is from interpretation A. We can find rhythm in dance. And from this rhythm, we create another projection, abstract projection. Is the abstract projection by interpretation B, we also find the same rhythm. So, but it is nuanced inside, because for the dance, the interpretation can be a lot, much wider maybe, because dance, as I mentioned, it's involved a lot of things, a lot of essence, a lot of perspective to look into dance. But when you emphasize on in rhythm and create another work, actually your interpretation B is more narrow. So although there seems like they are pointing to the same thing, but the interpretation, maybe we can say the interpretation B is more direct into this rhythm. And so we can say that the remapping is actually more focused to express the rhythm we extract. So it is quite, we can generalize this concept quite far away, and so we can have some conclusion as art is actually a tool for seeking truth, for knowing about our world, because what we are doing is actually language A and language B is pointing to a fact and phenomenon. But sometimes language A is more complex and more subtle to present the same phenomenon or fact, so that another language B may be more direct to express this. So this is also like we learn things or learn concepts from metaphor. Metaphor is like a tool to help us understand more complex or unknown concepts. From a known concept or relatively simple language or metaphor, we can go to the fact or phenomenon more directly. So this is actually a tool to know, to more focus on some fact and phenomenon. And so you can back a step and look at this example. Why sometimes we need to remapping an art, and for myself, at least one of the meaning is to more focus on some essence. But when I say language A and language B, I'm not always pointing to some descriptive language, but also experience. So, and different art form can provide different experiences. So this experience pointing to a fact, and another experience pointing to the same fact. And so art is as a tool, it sometimes create different experience. So you can look at phenomenon or fact in different perspective. So it is an example is that our world, our physical world, we learn a lot of things from our experience. We fell and we see apple falling down, and we play our toy car, and we learn things learn the world through this kind of experience. But also, we have a language A. Language A is physics, math, which a lot of people hate. It describes our world. But another time, we have language B, which is kinetic toys, which I make a lot of them. I make kinetic toys. And it actually is also pointing to our world. So this is what I'm saying. Art can be a tool for seeking truth. And a fact is that a lot of people is like this, right? So this makes the people who makes art, not only me and a lot of my colleagues in making art, we are actually doing a very meaningful job. Thank you.
Joseph, thank you so much. That was, that was fun.
Okay, I hope it is casual.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, it is casual.
It is very, oh, sorry, I thought you said schedule. And I thought, yes, we are pretty well on schedule. And yes, casual too.
Casual.
Do we have any questions from the audience for Joseph? Yes, this means I get to ask a question. I really enjoyed, oh no, damn it. No, that's fine. You guys are the audience, so you definitely get to ask the first questions rather than me just butting in. Please.
Thank you so much for your session. It was really interesting. I was wondering, you mentioned the use of metaphors, and how often do you incorporate using metaphors in your work other than, the physics, math, and kinetic toys? Like, do you apply, I guess, another level of metaphors in your body of work?
I use secondary school education to make all my works. Really. No calculus involved. So it is quite simple.
And I guess another question I have is on the materials used in the kinetic models, do you always use metallic materials or metals?
Yes, because it's earn more money.
That's a great answer. Thanks.
Make it shiny. Always make it shiny when you can.
Yeah. When you make the kinetic model or kinetic things too cheap, they won't sell.
Never make it out of plastic.
And most importantly, they don't last.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, I get to ask my question, and then maybe someone else might have one too. I'll try to keep it quick. My question was, this difference of actuation, whether there's electronics involved or whether your kinetic toys are almost like a prosthetic for the audience. So for you, when you put a motor in something, or when it's, like I was thinking of that dinosaur work, if you don't mind, I'll just go back here, maybe here so we can see it. The expression of my energy in, the artwork has a sort of prosthetic quality to it, that it becomes an unpredictable extension of my body, and the joy is maybe at first not knowing exactly what's going to happen when I turn the pedals, because as you said, there's wind chimes and all sorts of things hidden there.
Yeah, they might broke their legs.
Or they might hurt themselves. And then I think you mentioned that most of the time you don't use electronic motors. I was wondering if for you, is it by category, like a different type of work when it involves electronic actuation? Or in terms of your schema of like expression and truth,
Because I want things to be as transparent as possible. Because actually in my work, in my career, I make a lot of electronic stuff. And I write low-level programs too. Sometimes I write programs, but when making my works, I don't like doing some black box into my work. I want all to be visible, like you playing your toy car, or you playing with your apple trees, like Newton. It is all visible.
And so when there's a motor or something, is that a question of visibility for you? I was thinking in terms of how the audience reacts to it. If it's something that, just thinking of your mapping scheme here, where the audience comes into this.
It is not transparent.
Okay. Okay.
So this is more like a tool, but not an artwork.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So your kind of aesthetic preference is art, truth, and transparency often go hand in hand. In your preference.
I think just my opinion. And one very important aspect in art is that it has to be useless. This is intrinsic, because if it is useful, then it becomes some tools, but not something you have fun or you're curious at. Because if it is a tool, then a good tool is you know its purpose and all is fixed, and you already know how to use it, and the context all are fixed, and it has a very clear purpose. Then I think it is not art.
Yeah, there's no metaphor, since you're talking about metaphor. Yeah, I think this.
Didn't mean to force the microphone on you there. Yeah. Well, actually, Vivi, before we take a break for a drink, is there anything I was thinking about both Vvzela and actually Karen's presentations today on like the sort of the direct translation, like this perhaps. I'm trying to now navigate your slides, Joseph. This first, where language A appeared here. Like interpretation 1, I was thinking of your drawing, and then I was thinking of Karen's sort of interaction with the device. I was wondering if there's any, would you see your practice there, or would you kind of get this diagram and sort of change it a little bit?
I'm still processing this question, but first I want to say, like, when looking at this, I feel like I want to say that Joseph has given like all of us a full semester of interactive class. So that's basically, yeah. And you're asking about like the mapping between drawing and music. Should I simplify?
Your mapping between, say, for you, drawing and graphics.
Yeah.
And then by extension, some similar elements that Karen was discussing.
Okay, so basically, I'm still, like, from my perspective and my experience with my drawing, I'm still processing it as a medium in my work, because before I take it as a research drawing, so that's like behind. So all the drawings I show you today, they're actually not being exhibited before, and not even on the social media, some of them. And beside those, the very first roller. So before I take it as a kind of like mind map to, yeah, so I didn't take it as a kind of medium that can incorporate with other medium in the work. Yeah, so previously, yeah, very straightforward. No, I didn't think about that. Yeah, but recently I've been like trying to do more like drawing for fun, and drawing as a medium for the, yeah.
Yeah. I think what I take from here, and it's something that resonates with me, is the idea that you do things for fun because you like making them. The idea that you're fine to define what you produce as toys, and there's nothing wrong with that because we are playing with them. They're entities that we engage with in a kind of, and I think that's really powerful. Also, some of the ideas that you introduce here in anthropology, sometimes they speak about this idea of thick events. You know, the idea that human experience is high dimensional, it's complex, and we extract the data and we simplify it, and then we map it into something else, and then we have to upscale it again into some sort of medium, which is, I guess, what art is doing. But I have a question for you that maybe is unrelated to what we are discussing today. I think you use the word clockwork mechanisms, which is a word that I really like. When did you start thinking about translating the movement of an object from here to here into this chain of moving elements that are your kind of kinetic sculpture? Did you start at young age, or how did you start working on this whole kind of kinetic dimension of developing things that move, and how did that happen?
Okay, actually I make my work mostly first, it is intuition.
Okay.
I have some image inside my brain.
Okay.
Intuition. And the second, another reason of making a lot of this kind of works, another reason is because there's nothing similar I can acquire, maybe too expensive, or maybe it doesn't exist at all. So I make them myself.
Yeah, because for example here, what I find fascinating, if you focus on one element,
yeah,
is that probably there is a chain of 100 moving parts that make that possible. So it's a translation of something that looks simple, this, into such a complex kind of combination of different things.
It is actually the combination between concepts and engineering, because in my brain, I imagine things, how they move, and then I create linkage, which is AKA the mechanisms between them. Yeah, and it's quite a bit form-follow functions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is the approach like iterative? Do you try different things and different mechanisms, or do you have a predefined idea when you start of the different moving parts?
Well, normally I don't have a lot of time because the schedule normally is quite tight. So I don't have time to make a lot of iteration.
Okay.
So I just design it and it works, hopefully.
Okay. Good to know. Yes, it's time for food again.
Okay, so our second last speaker for the day is Lazarus Chan. Lazarus is someone whose practice I hadn't known that well, but had been recommended to me by multiple different people. They all said, oh, you've got to get Lazarus to talk. It's going to be super interesting. So we've met, we've looked at works online. I've seen brief things in exhibition, but I definitely don't know the breadth of Lazarus's practice. So I've been looking forward to this one also. You're already mic'd up?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So without further ado, let's do it.
My name is Lazarus. Full name is Fung, and this is my first time I know that I'm recommended by several person. And today's topic is multimodal mapping. And for my sections, I would like to talk about mapping between technology, human activity, and cultural objects. And for sure, with artistic. So for today, the whole sharing of the talk will divide it in 4 parts. I will briefly introduce my art practice because my art practice actually is quite diverse. I do sound, I do some kind of electronic device, and I also write software and graphics. And today I will pick up 2 specific artworks as Donnaruma Dog 2 and Scripting Meet 24 for the whole, give you an artistic journey that go through the whole concept about mapping between human activity, culture, and technology. That's why firstly introduce my art practice. So my art practice involves science, natural science, I suppose is, and digital imaging. I always like to play with camera, write my own software to capture images, manipulate pixels, play with AI, and my starting point actually is some generative system that create graphics. My first question is how to create a smooth curves inside a screen. Like if you want to create a curve, basically you have to calculate with sine, cosine, and tangent, something like that. but the result, as an artistic result, as an artist, to perceive that curve is mechanical. It's not organic, it's not happening inside the screen. That's why my first attempt to create a curve in a screen is to using some gravitational formula and using a tractor, calculate a virtual gravity and virtual brush to create this kind of generative drawing or painting. And also, because of some time I need to work on some interactive installation, so that's why I need to work on my own electronic device. Maybe it's a wireless or like a traditional electronics device for button, something like that. I also do so. And for that, there's other art projects, but I don't have time to go through all of that. So if you are interested in those, like this one actually is from CMHK. It's a project I did in the Hing and in III, and involved with Karen. CMHK, are you here, Karen? Oh, okay. So basically, keywords is digital imaging, soundscape, electronic device, algorithmic art, generative art, stuff like that. But what does mapping mean to me? Like, what is mapping itself? It could divide in 2 dimensions. Like, for sure, you could map data stream. Like, you got a MIDI keyboard, and then you got software, and then something happening on the screen, and then play, just play. And for this example, it's just one commission work I just did with the City University, and this one actually is a Kung Fu master, and she's doing Tai Chi. And then with this video, I could, using an AI assistant motion capture software, and then do the blah, 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 do all the magical stuff, and to make a real-time interactive animations. It makes sense, right? It so makes sense. It's nearly like the input and the output. It's like logical input, logical output. But my answer is, technically, mapping for me is blending 2 real kinds of objects or concepts together with harmony and reasoning. So if it makes sense, blend them together as an input and as the output. But my interest is actually, what about beyond the technical? Like, what are there? Like, because the technology will keep advance. And we could imagine all the special effects in Harry Potter, like moving graphics on a newspaper. It will happen one day. Then how humans interact with those medium. Like, by some sense, like mapping, eventually it will happen within narrative, within cultural objects, and the technological advancement. It is like a historical movement driven our history. So I select 2 artworks for today. And first one is, I just mentioned, is Multimodal 2. And I will go through an artistic journey with you. Again, I just mentioned it once more. And actually, I want to briefly introduce those background of this artwork first, because I couldn't explain the whole picture of these 2 artworks, my self-expression, my feeling, those sort of things. But I want to use these 2 artworks to relate to today's topics, like what are, how it relates to multimodal mapping. And so, Multimodal 2 actually is an investigation or representations of a hypothetical universal language. Universal language, you could perceive it like gesture, thinking, your thought, your speech, your sound, maybe your movement, stuff like that. But some specialists, like they try to find it, is there any universal language behind our language? So is there any rules or any logics behind that? So actually I started play with speech, symbol, semantics. So the next one will be to move on from semantics. From semantics, from language, move on to cultural objects, like how language incorporate with cultural objects. Like in the Chinese culture, we got the Tong. I will explain it later, how it works with the large language model and how it could relate it. We still have the same momentum, still have the same goal in our human society. So Phenomenon 2 mainly is mapping human activity and language. Keywords will be breath, sound, speech, word, meaning, and language. Actually, I create an installation, interactive installation with an electronic device that you could blow into the device, and then it creates symbol on the screen. Actually, it works like this. So like a flute, you blow to the flute, and then create those symbols. And the symbol actually are agents that wandering within the screen. Then, actually it comes from my daily practice. My daily practice, by that time, I actually, mostly every day I need to code, like open my computer, code everywhere, like just need to code. And my interest is when I do Google search, when I do code, there's some auto fill in suggestions for you, how it happened. I want to know it, like why, how it know my interest, how my data now is on the internet, how the language, how the symbol are combining together, become a meaningful object. Then I investigate into like the standard code of information interchange, like this chart, and then I find out how about I just use the alphabet and I deconstruct the alphabet. How about I see the alphabet as graphic, and then I deconstruct it into basic graphical form, and with multiple agency to create random action, what it will be. So the result for single screen, it will be like this. So imagine the audience come to my exhibition and create some symbol during the exhibition period, and those symbols keep floating, wandering inside the screen. Maybe they are searching for meaning, I don't know. Something we couldn't understand within this system, within the software and program. And something happened actually. During the exhibition period, I find out the system could actually create mystical symbol that I recognize. Like because I started from A to Z, but why here is Chinese character? Why here is a cloud? Why is a pie heart shape? Stuff like that. If back to like a modern linguistic theory, it's about semantics, how we perceive language and our cultural context and the signifier stuff. I don't want to go too deep, but actually, it's based on our cultural context, where you're from, what you have learned throughout your life, and then you find out meaning. Maybe that's the basics of language itself. And most of my artworks, my friend will say you're like doing reverse engineering about our world. Like you start at questions to experiment, and then reverse engineering with your artwork, and then we could find out some key element or the logics behind how the world works. Then I move on to the next artwork, Scripting Me 24, because now I know, oh, there's something happening, like within the word, sentence, language. But how from language, technology, culture to folk religion. how it could work. Like, because I really want to work with technology in a humanity perspective or philosophical thinking stuff. Then this is just an artwork I finished in Japan, Akita. The reason why I want to work on this artwork is throughout a year, continuously interact with large language model, different versions of that. I find out something weird happen. Like my working pace or daily routine goes so fast. Like sometimes my brain couldn't cooperate with that. Like, because I got several AI, I got my AI crew actually in my studio. Even now, they are still working. But my brain, like accidentally you become a boss of a company, now you could buy your employees and they work automatically 24 hours. And sometimes I feel stressful, my brain couldn't cooperate with that. And then also realize that different model from different cultural contexts, they have different perspective on the world. If you ask questions, I just finished an experiment with two large language models. One is from China, one is from US. I asked them like, what will happen for the next 10 years in Hong Kong ASEAN? And they have common ground, and they have something, they're disagreeing with each other, something weird like happening. It reflects our culture, reflects our human condition now. So throughout the whole process, I would like to say is actually the large language model, or throughout this natural language processing, actually it's a compression of our culture. How I would say like this, because one of the essential steps if you want to work with language in machine learning, you have to go through a step called word embedding or embedding. Actually, it's technically so related to today's topics. Actually, it's turn word into factor point, into numbers that you could calculate with. And the schematic is like this. Finger into 44.1, circle 33.9, something like this. It's mapping your experience or how you like to express yourself into numbers. Everything now you think that you couldn't become data, actually it already become data. And then I would like to claim throughout these selections, because we have to go through one more crucial step, is to dimension reduction, is to reduce those numbers, and then connect those numbers. Like here is a beautiful nearby is success, succeed, cheer, word like this. It creates relations between words. But who did it? Why? It still need to go through a cultural context step. And that's why I also find out people now like to ask all kinds of questions to ChatGPT, to your AI assistants. Actually, we did it in ancient times. This is Tongxing. This is a book of everything. You could learn English, you could, and then you will learn English like the previous generations. And then it gives you suggestions, what you should do, what you should not do, what you could do, what you could not do per day. But now, if I want to reimagine the Tongxing with AI, the Tongxing with large language model, what it will be. And it is still day by day, or the common ground. What are the common ground? Actually, the common ground is to ensure you'll be safe. to ensure you could predict a part of your future. Why you want to ask advice with ChatGPT? Because you got something you're not sure about. You got questions you couldn't answer. You want to predict your near future, far future, or just right now, you want the answer, and then you open the book, you open ChatGPT. That's why I, just few weeks ago, actually, 3 or 2 weeks ago, China open sourced a large language model called Kwun, and I'm so lucky that I could download this and and I use this large language model offline, ask the model 1 or 2 simple questions. But this time I want to create a Tongshan like cultural objects with specific questions, and the time frame is not day by day, it's per second. Because I want to express my stress, like this is the working place. You need to do things, you need to think per second. You need to be precise. Humans now need to be precise. And the machine need to be generative. Hilarious, right? Machine being creative. Human, more like a machine now. Ask the model, write down the schedule that Fung should do on what hour, what minutes, what second. Give the model one simple idea that, who am I? You could easily search this information online, just short introduction about me. Then something interesting happened. This is the first result and 0.0.0, just midnight. The AI model think that I need to do the following stuff. I translated into English with AI. And then Channel Phone need to prepare generative artworks. Channel Phone need to start an automatic data visualization generative art program. This program can analyze, process the data in real time. Lots of order I need to do. Actually, I still have to prepare my social media. I still have to activations of my interactive sound installation, and then prepare an online platform and or creative journal. Yeah, so much thing to work on. But as I just mentioned, this is a compression of our culture. This is the expectations from my mother country. If you want to be a successful artist in Hong Kong or being a Chinese Hong Kong successful artist, follow this model. You will be successful. Then, for sure, I generate 80,000 something from like Tong compositions and fill in those texts inside this software. And then make it as a video, then you will see you could never process the information. It's overwhelming, overflow your mind, but this know everything. That's why, to conclude, maybe it's better my artwork is maintain my perspective, like scientific and technological development, investigate into the detail, find out meaning within that, and let's see what we could do as an artist in the future and right now. That's the end.
Lazarus, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience for Lazarus? Okay. Do you have one?
I have one, but come on, you go first.
No, you go first. I went first last time.
Yeah.
Are you sure? No? No questions? So, Lazarus, thank you. Very interesting presentation. It's interesting to see how you reflect on something that I think, I guess people are kind of aware of, which is this idea of AI as a kind of culture embedding mechanism, at least from a textual point of view. And also the idea of AI as a memory machine, to the extent that we're feeding it with all of these texts, and nowadays mainly LLMs, yes, and stuff, that to some extent represent a shared history or a shared form of symbolic knowledge, let's put it that way. And I guess, I mean, my question has to do with, in the first project that you introduced today, in the Neuma, when these symbols that are not expected appear, and you seem to be puzzled by this fact, what is your answer to that? How did that happen?
My answer to that is simple. Actually, all of us is a random machine.
We're stochastic parrots, okay.
Yeah, the stochastic parrots.
Okay.
Like, actually, we back to like the sensory inputs that we got, like vision, smell, and my data and your data set is not the same. And then that creates something we call personality. Actually, we are not that far from a machine. And now last week, the most triggering saying is, now we could perceive machine or system to be not accurate or precise. It's a generative tool. Actually, it's just like human. Human are, for the last decade, we create so much. And now we create something that, there's something is creative enough that I have to respect. And that moment I feel respect. That moment I feel nothing special, but respect. Mm.
Right. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Joe.
Just curious what they said about the future of the Hong Kong art scene, because you said there was cultural embeddedness from the US and China. Do you remember what is the future?
Yeah. Actually, I'm planning to work on new artworks and based on that experience. The answer is they got common ground about the extreme political situation now happening all around the world. And the triggering point is the normal model said Hong Kong artists should be expressive and creative. And the China model said artists should be aware when you're doing artwork overseas. There will be political correctness. They are both saying the fact, but now you see the perspective. Now you see why our world now is like chaotic. And it kind of like reflects now the human conditions with this interesting conversations.
I have one question, if you don't mind. Okay, great. I was just curious, Lazarus, of your interpretation on the difference between, I don't know, is it a type of geomancy? The text, the Chinese text you're referencing, the original, is it, will we put it in that class of geomancy and sort of texts that are used in combination to generate like advice?
No.
Okay.
Nothing. I just put in questions, bypass all the stuff, and it feedback.
Right. No, so my question was, I'm just thinking of Espen, you would probably, I'm thinking back of what's in cybertext about the ergodic nature of these early Chinese texts for geomancy that, when used in the correct way, can be generative, can generate something that's not, the book is more a set of instructions for generating an output than it is a recorded text. And I was curious, using a new generative system in these sort of trained AI models, how would you compare the two in a sort of a previously sort of algorithmic form of generation that's thousands of years old to this kind of weights-based probabilistic ML model? What use the sort of qualitative artistic difference in the type of projection you get from both generative systems?
The ancient one, the old one, actually give you, because it's based on the philosophical thinking in ancient Chinese, like the Tao and other stuff. And it provoke people to think and provoke people to create their own lives. It encourages you to do it. It will tell you something. Your destiny is destiny, but you still have space that you could work with. But the contemporary versions actually just give you order.
Just gives you a more less room for interpretation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just give you order. Follow the order, step by step. Yes, it's more scientific. It's like writing a scholar paper. Actually, just step by step, so clear. But when you lack of interpretations, then something not good will happen, because you still have to leave some space for people, and then you maybe we call that freedom, and then you could work on what you want to, because the world in ancient thinking is the world are created by different force. Even me and you are different force. We are interacting. We could not precisely predict the future. But actually what we want to do now with machine learning model is to precisely predict the future.
Yeah, from the next word in a sentence to, yeah, okay, thank you. Should we move on to our final presenter? Any further questions from the audience? Okay, well, if that's the case, let's just give a round of applause to Lazarus Chan. Thank you so much.
Marco, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can
Hello,
you hear me?
how are you? Nice to have you
Hi. Yeah, thank you. I'm good. And you? Sounds
Okay.
like a good presentation so far.
Yes, it's been really interesting. Thank you for joining us. Marco is joining us from Europe, Marco Donnaruma. He's an artist, a dancer, a theorist, and someone working on something I would define, he might disagree, as a kind of a post-body narrative, exploring extensions of the body with prosthetics, through dance and so on. And his work is really powerful and interesting, so we are super lucky to have him here today. And thank you, Marco. Thank you for joining us. And I'll let you take the lead from here.
All right, thank you. Let's see, I'll share my screen. Do you see my slide? Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. All right, so thanks for the invitation. I will start by framing a little bit my practice in terms of mapping, since this is the theme of the workshop. And I was glad to see that the definition of mapping here is very broad. I find that quite useful. Because, you know, from a technical point of view, mapping is a sort of link or sort of relations between different kind of data. But other speakers today have also noticed the mapping between technology and cultural notion, for example. And that is pretty much also my approach. I mean, of course, I do different things. I perform. This is a picture I made with Manuel Bazon, a photographer and collaborator, for a new piece of mine that just premiered last February. I will tell you a bit more about it later, but as you can see, I'm interested in other forms of embodiment and how they possibly help create new mappings between what we think we know about the body and technology and everything else that lives around us. Okay, so I do what I would say a hybrid performance practice. So I was artistically born in media arts and always brought with me a strong passion for performance art. I've been mixing the two for the past 20 years or so, and in the last 10 years or so, I also started working in theater and dance. And my work is based on transdisciplinarity. So I work with interactive music, I create machines, invent robots, and do programming, perform, and I do believe in the need to bring down the borders between disciplines today. And that's what I try to achieve in my practice. Strong part of what I do is DIY culture. As other speakers here, I like to create things from scratch because they're not necessarily out there yet. Robots or other type of sensors and so on. And therefore end up always working between art, science, and technology, always often in cooperation with scientific laboratories around the world. And then I'm also a theorist, and part of my practice is also writing. It's very integral to what I do in the artworks. And I'm part of different research communities between feminist theory and critical disability studies and performance studies, of course. So I had planned to remove this slide, but then after the last presentation, I thought maybe I would leave a thought about that too. I don't use generative model. In general, I don't use technology off the shelf. I try to make everything I can from scratch. And if I'm not able to, try to work with other collaborators like the other speakers here. I am interested in generative models, though, quite a lot. So I just finished writing this article. It was published some months ago, Against the Norm, that really tackles the generative models as a method of creating pastiche from human culture artifacts. Now, I will not get into this in this talk, but I just wanted to point out I work a lot with technology. Everything I do is related to technology, but I do think that we need to be very careful in what we understand as technology, and also what are the implications of certain pieces of technologies or not. The way I see it, I've been working now for more than 10 years with AI and robotics and AI in robotics. And I think what we have now with large language models and so on are really technologies that work just with symbols and very compressed type of information, as Lazarus said before. But I will go beyond that. The fact that this technology work in this way brings forward a completely uncanny detachment from actual human experience. So in this sense, that's why I'm more interested in things like learning to be affected, which means just to focus, open up a bit the empathy sensory receptors that we all have, and try to learn what other things around us do to us, how they can affect us, how they do every day. And here I'm talking about other living things, but also about technologies, both in different ways, of course. And so how do, in this specific case of my work, how certain technologies can influence my sense of embodiment? How can I do that live on stage? How can that then give some sort of message to audiences? And it was pretty much the idea that I had when I started this cycle of work entitled 7 Configurations. It was done in 2015 and 2019. So I started from this idea how to inhabit alternative forms of embodiment, where inhabiting is a really nice word. It means, you know, like you inhabit your house, you inhabit your places. Like it's a way of living, in this case, different forms of embodiment. And what I mean by inhabiting here is that it's not faking it, it's actually really making it happen as an experiment on stage, and that is the performance. So to get a bit more practical, what do I mean with this? So here is pictures from first work that I did in this series entitled Corpus Nil. And here, this is what you see on stage. So there is obviously sort of optical illusion, which is done very simply. A part of my body is painted in black against a black background, and then the light and the sound is controlled by a model with different kind of machine learning embedded in it that capture sounds from my body to an instrument that I created more than 10 years ago. So a sort of stethoscope, if you like, but interactive. And the machine learning system then uses these data as I move to create light and sound patterns. So it is a sort of a duet between myself and this artificial intelligence system. And the communication, the mapping, if you want, here happens through these biosensors. So it's something that I cannot control directly, because I cannot really control exactly what sound this muscle will make in a specific moment. I have a range that I know, a range of activity of my muscle that I know how to control, but it's not like pushing a button. And that's what makes it interesting. So eventually there is a relation between me and the system, but I cannot really control it. I can stimulate it, I can influence it, but at the same time, if I want to be able to influence it, I also have to learn how the system influences me. And this is what I mean by learning to be affected in the context of technology. And of course, here, I guess people already have some other hints of mapping between notion of the body and different cultural contexts. So I would be quite curious to hear what people from Hong Kong associate these kind of images with. For me, it's also part of a project to deconstruct the white human body, which I find always very problematic. I'm white, that's my culture. I was disabled because I'm deaf. I'm using hearing aid to talk with you now. But you can't see my disability immediately. So another kind of mapping that I'm interested in is how experimentation with body and technology can help me deconstruct the notion of the white body as the kind of universal body, because that's what white culture tries to do all the time. In this sense, I also started working on different ideas of objections in art and technology. That's something that is quite uncommon, because normally when we think about technology, we think only about shiny things. And as the other speaker said before, if things are not shiny enough, they don't really sell well. That's true. Here, so I started thinking about these ideas and okay, what it means in our culture, my culture, white Western culture. How do we do here with ideas of rituals, of body modification? What do they mean in an era like ours, where people keep claiming that artificial intelligence is becoming intelligence like human, and blah, blah, blah. So I created this robot that is basically a robotic limb that is shaped pretty much as parts of my arms. It has a knife it has a knife here, and it cuts its own skin continuously in a loop. This is a provocative reference to rituals of skin cutting that are still practiced today in several parts of the world. What's interesting is that while these rituals are indigenous population are still very important, meaning of transferring knowledge and principle of one culture. In Western culture, cutting yourself now has become medicalized as a sort of psychological condition and another form of disability and so on. And there is a lot to unpack there. I will not go there, but this is more or less the starting point here. And again, here we see many different layers of mapping and relation between technology, skin and flesh, ritual operation, people making videos on Instagram of this thing cutting itself and sharing it. It's like, it's a cool thing. You know, it's all fantastically enmeshed with one another. Then continuing this kind of research, I did also a couple of performances with other robots that I created myself. And here we see some images from Hing, which is a performance was co-directed with Margherita Pevere, who is a bioartist. And here I kept exploring different ways of deconstructing the body, but also try to offering different ideas about technology, not as necessarily something that make the body stronger, more efficient, and more productive, but rather something that can also undermine or take away things from the body. For example, here, both Margherita and I have these facial prostheses that block our gaze. And we don't see much on stage, and that's part of the piece. How do we perform in that condition? Margherita has a facial mask made of bacteria, made by bacteria cultures. So it's a biofield. And I have this mask on my face, which is another robotic limb attached to this sort of helmet. And here also the prosthesis, similarly to the previous one, generate movements by itself by exploring my body, because it is on my body and its own surrounding. So what's interesting about all this project is that I could collaborate with neurorobotics laboratory in Berlin, and because they use this robotic technology to develop android machines, and they try to study how to develop intelligence. What this means is that they don't make robots that follow instruction, but they make robots that have a sensory motor system, that they can sense things around them at a basic level and then generate reactions to that. And so I could work with this frame, and that's been pretty interesting, because you really see how the machine with very simple movements actually start to feel like a living creature. You see the video here, yeah. I'm gonna speak over the video. And again, here we come back to other layers of mapping. So it's interesting to me, these artworks, the fact that the robots is actually fairly simple for robotics in general. It only moves on 2 axes, this and this. But it all comes down to this way of programming it, where you don't give detailed instructions, but you program the way it senses something, and then you program a range of reaction that the robot can have. And through that, then you create a machine that feels like it has a life on its own. Of course, it doesn't. It is run by several neural networks. It learns how to move, it learns how to cut, it learns how not to destroy itself with a knife. That's probably the most challenging task for it. But eventually it doesn't feel pain when it cuts itself. And most people then tell me, oh yeah, but you could program it. Yeah, I could, but it wouldn't be pain anyway. Pain is not just a command line in our brain, right? So here we also start seeing where the stereotypical mapping starts to break down. And that's what I find interesting. And then moving on, yeah. So in terms of mapping that start to breaking down, as you can see, I'm very much interested in prosthetics, but also as a concept, not necessarily limb and definitely not devices that help a disabled person. I am disabled because society is not made for people who don't hear. I'm not disabled by my impairment. I still do music, I have my ways, I can communicate in many different languages and a bit of sign language too. So a prosthesis is a lot more than just a tool that helps something. And I always come back to this quote by Margaret Shildrick, a feminist scholar in critical disability studies. And she said this beautiful thing, like prostheses exceed their instrumentality and construct the very thing that they purport to merely enhance, which is the body, obviously. So what is that kind of construction? How a prosthesis construct a body? That's a very interesting question, and it has to do with all different kind of mapping, from the technical one to the physiological one, the psychological one, to cultural level as well. And so this brings us, like, last minute to briefly talk about this. This is my new work, mentioned in the beginning. It's called Excellence. Now, the background is this work emerges from several months of research with a group of other deaf people, where in these months of research, we experienced different kind of technologies inspired by hearing aid and cochlear implants, but then I subverted them and used those same algorithms to create other stuff. And we exchange our experience of sound, we exchange our experience of the medicalization of our identity and so forth. And then I made two works. One is a film that I will not talk about now, but it's on my website. And the other is this performance excellence. Here, as you can see in this picture, I have different kind of prostheses. The ones that you see on my body here, I call them sonic prostheses. So they produce movement, vibration, and sound at the same time. And I use them on stage in different ways. On one hand, I couple them with the sensor I mentioned earlier that captures sounds from the body. So here you can see, for example, I have those sensors here on my arms. Those are connected to the prosthesis. And in this way, I can capture sounds from my body and have the audience feel those sounds inside their body through the prosthesis. The prostheses are basically acoustic transducers. So once you put it on your body, you start feeling vibration, or if you put it on the bones of the head, you start seeing the sound inside your head. So these whole idea basically emerged from an intuition of what it means to discover different forms of attunement. We come back to what I mentioned earlier. What it means to learn to be affected, but through a sort of communal reconfiguration of the senses. And so this is what I do in the performance. So I have very intimate encounters with the audience, and I use the prosthesis, as I say, to amplify my body sounds into their bodies, or vice versa. Also the sound from the audience into the bodies of other audience members. Then I use also my body as a sort of acoustic resonance box. So I play sound through the prosthesis inside my body, and then I move around the space, and you can hear the sound or feel the sound through my body and through touch. And then I also use the same prosthesis to resonate other objects and then create sort of augmented instruments from different kind of materials. And in this way, my hope is to, well, of course, on one hand, the project is on deafness, so it is really based on reconfiguring also the idea that non-disabled people have about deafness. On the other hand, it brings forward my whole discourse about body and technology and going a little bit deeper in what body technology means, what do they force us to think at a cultural level. There's a very specific way of thinking about technology and the body, and this is dictated most of anything by popular culture. And this day, popular culture is a monopoly of big corporations. So how can we undo those cultural mapping in a more interesting way? What if a prosthesis is not just an individualized aid for people who do not fit society, but rather it becomes a mean to share the experience of these people with others so that we can also learn from them and reconfiguring our senses. So that's it. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm a little late.
Thank you. Can you hear us? Maybe not. Not working. Not working. Need to mute this.
Yeah, can you hear you? You're very low.
Maybe now. Wait. Is that better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Questions? Anyone? Don't be shy. Oh, we have a question.
Great.
Hi, Marco. Thanks, very amazing work. So I would be interested in like how you said you built the robots from scratch, or the prosthetics, like how you built them and like how you control the movements, like, or like how you program it, if you want to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a long way to get there. So it was very important to work together with this laboratory of neurorobotics. Basically, I did 1.5 years of crash course into neurorobotics. That was fun, although sometimes a bit over my head as well. I'm a programmer, but I'm not the best programmer around there. I fare a lot better with electronics and biomechanics because that has also to do with understanding how the body works. So I had a team. There was an engineer, designer, and then some scientists. And then I developed the biomechanic of the robots, which is the morphology. So how certain parts should be like, how they move together, what kind of motors you need to move a certain part based on the weight and the speed and all these other things that you have to do before you actually just think about the shape for it. And the shape is also dependent on the body itself and how it moves. So it's quite complex even before you start programming. Then the way it is programmed, it works with an FPGA computer board. That's a field programmable array, which is basically a small computer board that has no operating system, and you just program it from scratch to do what you need it to do. Now, without going too technical, the fact of not having an operating system helps a lot in having the robot creating this sort of very organic behavior, because there is no latency between the sensor input and the reaction that is computed by the machine. when you have an operating system, Windows, Apple, whatever, even on Linux, you have a lot of background tasks that are running the whole time. So it's in the nature of those systems to have latency. And once you have latency with a robot that is actually performing on stage, you see it. Like something happened, and then 1 second or 1 second and something, and then you get the reaction. And then, yeah, the other very important part was to train physically with the prosthesis and understand what needed to be refined in terms of design and biomechanics and programming by moving with it, wearing it multiple times for several hours a day and see what happened.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Kind of, yeah.
Cool.
Thanks.
Any other questions? We have a question. We have a question. We're getting closer to the speakers here. Feedback might join us.
Hi, Marco. This is Edwin. So good to see you
Hey.
many years later. So it's very good, very interesting to see that you still use the bandage, the sounding bandage of your muscle sound that with your current practice. But when I go through your website before, so I'm curious about your artistic speculation of the final visual presentation. Could you tell us a little bit more about the source of your inspiration in that? Maybe you reference to some folklores in European folklores or something like that. I'm not so sure, but could you tell me a little bit more? And then the second question is much more practical in a way that I think you're building on your own team, and you do a little bit more on theatrical performance, and sometimes you be the performer yourself. So what is the challenges and difficulties in the process and with the venue or with your teams?
Well, hi Edwin, good to see you virtually. And thanks for these questions. Okay, so artistic inspiration, well, that comes a bit from everywhere. I am a book addict, so a lot of inspiration comes from books. And I like to build images in my head, like other speakers say the same, and then try to think from there. Another great inspiration that has to do with my culture is Christian religion. I am not religious and I have lots of problems with Christianity. I do respect it nevertheless. But you know, being Italian, I find it artistically speaking, like aesthetically speaking, for me it's amazing because the whole imagery of Christianity, it's gore, it's very visceral, it's quite brutal, and also very mystic at the same time. So there is a lot there to be inspired from. And then a lot of other inspiration comes from anime and various types of science fictions, things, but especially old science fiction stuff. And of course, from other artists too. I mean, of course, I get inspiration from work like Stellar or Lam, or also in theater and performance. There is Sagazan, who is a great artist and performer who has nothing to do with technology and is great inspiration for me. Or something else I always come back is the paintings of Beksinski. He was a Polish painter. Amazing, amazing work. So to summarize, anything that is a very strong aesthetic impact is of great inspiration to me to go through my idea and start to visualize something. And I try to do things that are not there yet. And the other question, the challenges, yeah, well, a lot of challenges that we would need an hour to discuss about that. But Yeah, what I've been doing lately is, you know, in my artistic practice, my solo artistic practice, I sometimes work in team, but I try to keep being an outsider, which means not really to worry about whether my work can fit somewhere or not. That was a big worry some years ago, and then I understood, well, the work goes where people want the work. It doesn't really matter if it's in the music scene, in the theater scene, in the media arts scene. And that actually was quite liberating, and it turned out to work very well. So the challenge there for my individual practice is more about how to keep doing work that are ambitious and rigorous, while finding the right partners. And that's really most important thing, I think. Then in the group, the work that I do most with my artist group, for example, that's more targeted to performing arts, theater, and dance. Of course, we do also very experimental work there. There are more challenges in that scene is still very conventional in Europe. There are pockets of the scene of the community where people is doing more experimentation like we do. But in general, if you want to tour theaters and dance, you really have to do hard work. If you want to tour with this kind of stuff that we do. Yeah, I could go on and on, but I think I probably should stop here.
Any other questions? No? No? Peter, do we have a question? So, I mean, this is the last presentation. To me, there's a key idea here that resonates with my practice, which is the centrality of the body as a kind of haunting presence, even in the digital arts, as a kind of underpinning scaffolding that makes everything possible, and that we sometimes forget. And Mark, thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining us. We'll keep in touch, and it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, and so that concludes our program today. I want to give a big thanks to our presenters, to Osage for hosting this event today, and to our audience for staying with us. We have taken on some feedback that we will try to keep our public programs maybe a little shorter in the future, but this...
Who complained?
We do tend to go for a little endurance, but we hope that these last 2 weeks of kickstarting this program have been interesting. From our perspective, I'm super happy with this kind of body of knowledge that's really been lent to us by all these artists over the past 2 weeks. I'd also like to once again thank Jafan for helping us so much in the past few weeks. And to Roberto, I like working with you. Thank you, everyone.